this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. Is it a good morning for you? I hope it is. It's a good morning for me. I don't know why, I just feel like being slightly chipper and optimistic today. Not that there's a lot around to be chipper about. Are we on the brink of World War III? We keep hearing it, don't we? Well, people in Europe at the Munich Security Conference are saying that Trump's little parley with Vladimir Putin is akin to appeasement. And the last time America seemed to cozy up to would-be dictators and said, you know what, Europe, you've got this. You've got to look after yourselves. There was a world war. Is that right, though? Is that founded in truth? I think there's a lot of different opinions out there. I always say, you know, park this as potential Trump derangement syndrome. If it was Ursula von der Leyen who'd gone to speak to Putin, they would be absolutely opening the bottles of champagne. They'd think it was wonderful. A deal is not a deal until a deal is done as well. And if anyone knows the art of the deal, surely it is the leader of the free world. But plenty of them are feeling very nervous about the nature of that conversation. We're going to be deep diving into that during the course of the programme and keeping an eye on that Munich Security Conference and seeing what headlines indeed come out of it. Also, growing pressure on Rachel Reeves this morning as ministers have come out to bat from the cabinet saying this is a made-up story, this whole expenses thing when she was in a banking job with HBOS. She didn't do that. There was no investigation into her. And the BBC go, we've got the receipts. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. And, of course, another day, another migrant farce, another ruling where somebody has made some spurious reason up why they should have the right to remain in the UK, and a judge has gone, oh, I don't want to do this, but I suppose I'd better let you. This time it's a Ghanaian. She's won the rights to stay in Britain after staging a sham marriage that she didn't even attend. And they're like, well, you know, you were sort of married long enough, or you've been with this guy who said, you know, we'll let you stay anyway. I'm sorry. There's also Ghana. I used to live in Ghana. One of my best mates is currently in Ghana. Ghana's fine. In fact, by and large, I'd probably rather live in Ghana right now than Britain. So I don't even know what all the fuss is about. Just say, you know, thanks, but no thanks. Off you go. You got better weather. Anyway, it's just ridiculous. And Labour are under fire over another WhatsApp chat. Now, this one, it really does make me laugh because I don't want to live in a world where anybody loses their job or gets persecuted because they've had some banter in a WhatsApp group. Because I'm a grown-up. Banter's banter. A chat in a WhatsApp group's a chat in a WhatsApp group, right? But the very people who would go after someone for that is the Labour Party. They're the ones who hate humour. They're the ones who hate free speech. And it seems to be them who are chucking about accusations of people being Nazis, and I hope various people die. Hope they fall under a bus, aren't they, scum? Live by the sword, die by the sword, I say. And if you don't like free speech, guess what? You can't have any. We're going to be discussing all of this over the course of the next 3 hours. I am with you until 1 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And guess what? You can join us in a little spot of communal catharsis on this crisp and clear, beautiful sunny day. Well, it is in London. I'm looking out of the window at the vista of the London skyline, and there's barely a cloud. Rather pleasant looking. Hey, maybe spring is round the corner. If you want to join us and throw in your two-bit about anything we're talking about today, the number is 0344 499 1000. You can call me up, register your interest to join the conversation at any point in the next 3 hours. And I've got a team of crack producers who will pick up the phone, take your name, take your details, vet you to make sure you can speak and you're not going to say anything that's going to get me into trouble with off-communists. And when all of that is good and clear, they'll give you a call back. So it's very easy. It's far easier to get in touch with us and than anything else. We don't put you on hold. You have to listen to all the nonsense sort of, you know, take that music or whatever it is and then be patched through to Bangladesh. No! We're good here with our telephone service. You can use that number for WhatsApp as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number if you'd like to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note. You know how much I love voice notes. I keep saying it's like a little miniature holiday within the course of a programme for me because my producers just have lined up 3 little voice series for you there. Play them whenever you want and I can just sit there and go, oh, fancy catching my breath. Let's have a voice note. So why don't you give me some respite and do that? 0344 499 1000. If you want to use good old-fashioned SMS, it is 87222. And you have to write talk before your message. Why? So it pings the aerials on top of Talk Towers, that's right. And we're on X at talkTV. OK, let's jump to it without any further ado and speak to the wonderful political correspondent for The Spectator, James Hill. Good morning, James.
Morning, Alex.
How are you?
I'm good. Not as chipper as you in the face of Armageddon, but I'm still all right. Thank you very much.
I love that in the face. I think that's why I'm actually deliriously happy, because I've read the runes and they ain't pretty. We're in big trouble. So let's talk about that, shall we? Trump has been accused of World War II-style appeasement, and MPs are warning Britain must be ready to go to war with Russia. Well, we've heard this already before, but let's unpack some of this conversation, these arguments taking place around the edges of the Munich Security Conference. What we do know, right, is Trump has had a long telephone conversation with Putin. He said he was going to, and all hell's broken loose ever since. Tell us more.
Yes, so this was on Wednesday evening. The President of America and the President of Russia both spoke together, and that really threw Europe into a bit of chaos because it's all about this conference setting up the plan for Ukraine and the peace negotiations. And some Europeans quite rightly said, hang on a sec, we want to give Ukraine the strongest negotiating position. Therefore, it seems mad to sort of take away their strongest cards. Those are about what borders the Ukrainians are going to accept. Is it going to be pre-2014 or post-2014? And also about having the pledge to join NATO. Taking those off the table so early on would potentially hinder the efforts. And then we see last night, Alex, that Pete Hesketh, who was the Defence Secretary, made some comments on this, has now had to walk back some of those comments. Right. So it's a kind of classic Trumpian style. What does he mean exactly? He's blowing hard one area, taking back the other. So I think it all tees it up nicely, but I do think there's going to be some kind of negotiation. And to be frank, I mean, it was always going to be the case, given how much money America gives, the Americans were always going to be the one who sort of they were the ones who made the decision on this, I'd say.
Right, and you know what? That doesn't surprise me, because what really is getting on my nerves, listening to all these hand-wringing moaners over in Munich, is they created this problem in the first place. It's all very well Olaf Scholz saying, well, you probably shouldn't sit down and offer things to Putin. It's like, excuse me? When Russia invaded Ukraine, they were still wanting to build Nord Stream 2. They were saying you can't send German weapons that have been sold to the Czech Republic cannot be sent to Russia. Russia, just got away with murder, frankly, in the first 6 weeks of that invasion, because the EU were deciding what they wanted to do. Are they going to apply sanctions? Are they going to allow weapons this? The UK was the only one who said, right, we've got to get in there and try and prevent this from happening. And so this has now dragged on for a long time. And yet again, Europe is saying, oh, well, you can't go too hard against Putin because he might use a nuclear weapon. Oh, you can't talk to him. Oh, if you back him into corner, he fights like a rat. Oh, God, America, please come and help us. Please help us. Please help us. We've not spent anything on our defence. And then as soon as Donald Trump wades in and goes, right, come on, guys, I've got this. I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe you're speaking to him. I remember Emmanuel Macron sitting around that oversized giant white table in the Kremlin thinking he was toast of the town.
You're completely spot on, Alex. And I think you can make 2 points. One of which is, I think, the way in which Trump has gone about this is the wrong way of negotiation. But the other, as you completely say, is the Europeans have had years to prepare for this. I mean, how many times do you have to have a wake-up call before you realise that the patient is brain dead? These are just a number of different times when the Europeans, they were told in 2016, told in 2020, told in 2022, when, of course, Ukraine was invaded, and actually have repeatedly not taken this seriously and not rearmed. And, here in the UK, we have a good record on Ukraine. We were helping them, train them for years after 2014. But it is a tragedy, I think, that still there are many people in Whitehall who don't seem to take the need to rearm seriously. And that's why we're still having this debate around 2 to 2.5%, when really it should be closer to 3%, which is what it closer was during the Cold War.
Right. And actually, if you look statistically, you look at America, a population of about 340 million people. You look at just the European member states of NATO, which are basically the EU member states and the UK, population of about 500 million. And yet we're not coughing up anywhere near what America's coughing up. And yet most of the action, most of the hubbub is happening in Europe. NATO is set up as an alliance to defend largely Europe after the Second World War. And there seems to be a lot of mudslinging. The other thing I find utterly incredulous is now people are going, oh, well, you can't just take Crimea off the table. Hold on. Trump wasn't even remotely in politics in 2014 when Obama and European leaders said to Putin, yeah, you can have Crimea, don't you worry about that. Now, all of a sudden, some sort of condition for the end of this war is Putin giving up Crimea. Frankly, it's for the birds. I also remember at the outbreak of invasion, all of the various armchair commentators and experts and, military leaders saying, well, you've got to build Putin a golden bridge. Trump's gone, do you know what? I get this, man. I know his ego. I'm going to say to him, listen, Vlad, mate, this war's stupid, you're wasting money, they're wasting money, get this done, we're going to finish it. You can then, if you play nicely, come back into the G7 ego stroke, and everyone's like, oh, you can't do that. I mean, I don't understand when we don't know the details of this deal. It's been one conversation and it isn't a deal. The deal's not done until the deal's done. Why everyone is kicking off as if it's something finalised.
I think that's a good point, which is that, how Trump does do these deals is that there's a lot of talk sometimes, and negotiation, counter-negotiation can be about feeling them out as well. I also think that on your first point as well, Alex, about Europeans have basically enjoyed for many decades now generous welfare states which have been paid for through American taxpayer largesse. And let's be frank, a lot of the Continentals have been quite smug about that fact and saying, we don't need to spend it. That is basically because the American military presence has been there, and there have been warning signs for a while, and Europe should have taken this seriously. I suspect we may end up in a situation what we had between 1945 and 1990, if you remember, when the French and the UK and the Americans all were occupying parts of West Germany. And that could be a situation where we happen in Ukraine, where we end up having some kind of NATO presence provided by European countries. But I think the warning signs need to be there. And also Europe should be very aware, of course, that there's another great power on the scene, which is China. And so the Americans have been saying for years they're very much more concerned about China than they are about Europe. And I think, frankly, this should have been done yesterday. And if we can't do it today, we ought to do it before tomorrow.
Right, it'd be a good idea if at that security meeting they discuss open borders as well, but I doubt that's going to be on the table. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves and this. I mean, what is going on here? You explain to me, because it seems to me they're now saying, oh, nothing happened, there was no fiddling of the expenses, this is all made up. And the BBC is saying, We've got the receipts.
Yeah, so there's two different dimensions to this. This all concerns Rachel Reeves' pre-2010 career, one of which is about the length of time she spent at the Bank of England, and that's obviously been about her claims on the CV. Those claims on the CV have now been revised twice, once when the initial Guido Fawkes story went out last year, now a second time with the BBC's been reporting this week. So that's an embarrassment, I'd say, about sort of exaggeration of CV claims or not getting things right. The second point is about the allegation that she was investigating at HBOS for potential expense claims. The BBC established that an investigation did take place, but they cannot find out what the conclusion of that investigation was. Obviously, all everyone on Labour will say is that this shows that actually nothing's been gone wrong. They can't prove anything. But it is worth noting, I think, that she was left in a settlement, I believe, according to the BBC reporting, whereby lawyers were involved. And I would suggest that a middle manager at a provincial bank doesn't tend to get that. There's never normally a good sign if the lawyers are involved. But it all adds to this idea about Rachel Reeves is how credible is she? Because she came into politics. She said, I've did 10 years at the Bank of England. She hadn't. She said, I've worked as a banker before. She left in a difficult situation, it seems, and it now leads to people also talking about her and also conflating that with the line she's heard in Parliament, which is that she's sort of Rachel from accounts. And the idea, of course, she was meant to be the Iron Chancellor. She's ending up being considered a bit of a figure of ridicule. And I think that given the dire straits she finds herself in ahead of that March 26th OBR budget forecast, she's in a really difficult position. And the danger is, of course, Norman Lamont was the devalued Prime Minister of the devalued government, he said, of John Major. This is the overhyped Chancellor of an overhyped government, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, given that there's a little bit of internecine warfare here, that perhaps there are people in the Labour Party who think with Rachel Reeves gone and out of the way, it might allow Starmer to make some U-turns? He doesn't seem to be a man who likes admitting he's wrong. He seems extremely intransigent. But actually, if he's got a fall guy or a fall woman, it might enable him to start unpicking some of the stuff that's been vastly unpopular that we know isn't working. I mean, just reports out today from local councils saying if you carry on with this national insurance increase on employers, that includes us, we've got to pay that and we're going to go bust. I mean, they've made some absolutely glaring mistakes that at some point Starmer's going to have to confess to, and the easiest way of doing this, as we know, is having the scapegoat.
I think that Keir Starmer has very little interest in economic policy. From talking to people in and around government, they say that he's much more interested in, say, chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee, much more involved in the summits than he is about economic policy. I think that in the short term, if Rachel Reeves was to go, that would put Keir Starmer himself he would be in danger, his political position. And people will be saying, hang on a sec, you had the budget. Why wasn't number 10 holding number 11 to account? Why weren't you asking the difficult questions and all of this? So I think that Rachel Reeves will be there, but I think the question is about how much of the government's credibility is tied to her own personal reputation, which is now taking such a hit. And I think the other thing to say, of course, is most Labour MPs I spoke to yesterday, they were pretty in support of Rachel Reeves. A couple of them described this story as a witch hunt. But I do think a couple on the left of the party are saying, hang on a sec, let's not forget that talk about sort of fraud in a previous life was something that did for Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, not so long ago. Is there a perception, perhaps, that Keir Starmer handles those so-called mates of his, people he's close to in Cabinet and Minister, differently to how he treats others? And that will be something longer term to watch out for as well.
Let's talk about credibility. Let's talk about the credibility of a Ghanaian tourist who was granted the right to live in Britain under Brexit marriage rules, even though she didn't attend her own wedding. It's ridiculous. Francisca Boateng, 42, won an immigration appeal after claiming that her proxy marriage to a German citizen living in Britain had lasted long enough to qualify for her to remain in the UK. She came on holiday to Britain where she met a German called Fatau Sualihu. Yeah, he sounds deeply Germanic to me. Before returning home to divorce her husband. She organised a proxy wedding in Kumasi in Ghana. I know Kumasi well. In December 2018, that neither she nor her new husband attended. And yet she's allowed to stay. That's mad.
Absolutely, and I think that this is just one of a drumbeat of stories we've seen in recent days. The Telegraph is doing a big look at immigration tribunals, and one thing that keeps coming up again and again is the right to a family life under the ECHR and Human Rights Act. And it seems increasingly this has been expanded, this definition. People are increasingly looking at these cases and seeing how the horrifying details, some of them, they're either illogical, as you've just highlighted in that case there, or they're perverse, whereby you have, for instance, a Pakistani paedophile this week refused to be deported on the grounds that it would hurt his family life. I mean, the jokes write themselves. It's tragic. And so I do think this is going to be one of those areas, Alex, where we need to see investigation either by this Labour government or potentially a future centre-right reform Tory government of some kind.
Oh, we need some drastic policy when it comes to immigration, both legal and legal. James Heal, thank you ever so much. You know, the thing that really gets my goat, all these people gaming the system, trying to stay in the UK, when the proverbial hits the fan here in Britain, as it will at some point, whether it be civil unrest or whether it be going to war with Russia or whatnot, these people aren't going to stick around and help us. They're not going to be going, we love Britain, we're going to help defend Britain. We fought so hard and took taxpayers' money to have lawyers to make sure that we can stay here. They'll be the first people back on the plane to Kumasi. That's what gets my goat. They don't have loyalty here. Why should we have loyalty to them? Right, if you want to get in touch, 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. You can use that for WhatsApps and leave me a voice note. Lots pouring in already. I'm going to read those during the advert break. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. Write the word talk before your text. Otherwise, there's a risk it could end up a few floors down in Times Radio, and they're way too polite and way too centrist for us, aren't they? We're on next at talkTV. I'll see you after this.
I was encouraged as well with the story today that Disney is now ditching its woke warnings on its movies, because they even went through this mad period where there were warnings on Dumbo, the cartoon film, because of a group of crows that had stereotypical black voices. Jungle Book slapped with a warning that talks about negative depictions or mistreatment of people or cultures, and they said those stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Well, apparently they're not wrong now, because now they've taken the warnings off.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. If you see me ruminating like a bovine, I was trying to eat a pear during the advert break, and all of a sudden Tech Op says to me, right, we're coming back now, so I'm having to swallow pear as fast as I can. I've got bits of skin between my teeth, so apologies for that. Shall we give me a break while I sort out my dental needs and speak to Phil, who is in Hertfordshire? Hi, Phil.
Good morning, Alex. Good morning. Alex, just listening to what we're talking about with our fantastic Chancellor and the expenses scandal that's now evolving, I think this Labour government are in freefall. Now, they're clutching everywhere, and I think what's happening is they're looking over what's going on in America, what Trump's doing, exposing all the corruption and the fraud within the Democrats. They're seeing what's going on. I mean, maybe a lot of people don't know this is going on, but if you go online, you'll see it, where they're into Congress are interviewing these Democrats. And they're being absolutely exposed to the corruption that's been going on. Now, if you are in the Labour Party, surely you've got to have one eye looking at that as to think, well, hang about, this could be coming our way.
Wow, it'd be great if it did come our way. I think we need to be well and truly doged. I know exactly what you're talking about, all sorts of people. I mean, we're looking at some of the things coming out on, they've got sort of these young whiz kids from X and from AI and all the rest of it. Some like 19 years old, but they don't half know to rip through a computer system like a typhoon. And they've discovered so much stuff where money's been going. They said they're going to now audit where the money in Ukraine went. And you're saying if they did the same here and if they looked into the Labour Party, what would they find? I agree. The thing is, though, the Labour Party are the majority government. They're not going to allow it. They'll protect their own.
Yeah, this is the problem, isn't it? You know, because some of them people in America, them representatives, they got like $200,000 a year salaries, but they've got like God knows how many millions in the bank. And it's like, what the heck is going on? But yeah, you're absolutely right. They do control it, don't they? But surely, you know, I think what happens is that old saying, isn't it? You give an inch, you take a mile. I think they'll trip themselves up.
Well, let's hope so, but they don't seem to be held to the same account as a right-wing government. I mean, here's a great example. One of the first things the Labour Party did when they got into power was say to the OBR, right, you're going to have all of these extra measures that you can use. We're going to do what you say. That's how brilliant we are. And then the OBR turned around and said, yeah, you know this 22 billion black hole doesn't exist, does it? And of course it exists. And the OBR's like, no, we've kind of looked and it doesn't. And then the OBR said about Rachel Reeves' budget, this is going to cause a lot of problems, you know. So, I mean, you know, they set up these organisations that are apparently independent to mark their homework. And when they do and say this is rubbish, they still do it anyway. And most of, you know, sides of the media just go, oh, but they're nice, aren't they? Because it's Labour. I despair. But do you know what? I think that never before has a government been so unpopular so quickly. The general public know what's going on, and that is what matters. Phil, my love.
Up, Alex. We're waking up.
I know, you are. You keep me on my toes. I mean, we need to do the same with this government. Phil, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's have a quick voice note. This is Matt in Hove.
Alex, Matt in Hove here. Just want to make a couple of points about Rachel Reeves and her CV. So I run a headhunting firm in financial services. I've seen thousands and thousands of CVs with banking backgrounds. If I'm honest, her CV, once the dates are correct, she's probably in the bottom 20% that I've seen. And think about well over 90% of those people don't even get the job they're going for, which are quite normal, run-of-the-mill jobs in financial services. So her CV is poor.
Wow, so actually she's a bit of a slow coach, back of the class Reeves, is it? And there she is in charge of the entire nation's budget. Your money, my money, our future children's money, our grandchildren's money, given the size of debt. Well, that's reassuring, isn't it? Brilliant voice note. Loved that one. Keep your voice notes coming in. Let's speak to Mark, who's in Swansea. Hi, Mark.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well, Bodada.
Sorry, I'm English.
Oh, well, you know, some of us get over the line, don't we? I used to live in Wales myself and I survived.
Oh, I love it. I just want to say about Zelensky.
Yeah.
Zelensky's going to do what the hell he's told by Trump. Going right back to when Biden was involved with Burisma and everything. It's worth digging out a clip where Biden actually says it out loud that he withheld aid to get the guy looking into Burisma, the company that his son was taking millions from, got him fired. He actually says it. So, and Zelensky, I'm jumping forward a bit, but effectively, it's the corruptest country known to man, pretty much, out there. Would you time where Doge goes through the accounts on what's been spent over there, how much either in Biden's time and since that Zelensky's siphoned off?
Yeah, I mean, look, well, I think everything needs to be doged. I'm looking forward to America doging that as well. And you bring up something that's really quite interesting. I think there's a lot more yards to come in the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing. You know, we know that the Bidens were intricately related to business affairs over in Ukraine before the war broke out. We also know that one of his last acts in office was Joe Biden issuing pardons for basically every single family member, not just for things they've done in the past, but for futurity as well, which makes me think there ain't no smoke without fire, is there? So something is afoot here. Look, we don't know what's going to go on with this deal. Well, it's not even a deal, is it? People are talking about it like there's some sort of like everything's been carved up and it's sorted. All we know is there's been a phone conversation. And the other thing we know about Trump is he says one thing and then he'll still be pretty ruthless on the other hand. You know, under the Trump administration last time round, they threw sanctions at Russia. There were 300, I think it was 300 Russian troops killed in Syria by American soldiers. There was a sort of a face-off there. So, you know, I just think, yes, we need to warn Trump about appeasement and go, well, maybe he doesn't get it. But again, you know, Europe needs to... It needs to sort itself out because we've been far from showering ourselves in glory, singing from the same hymn sheet and taking decisive action. Brilliant. Thank you for your calls. That was Mark in Swansea. If you want to be like Mark or Matt before him, the number is 03444991000 to either give me a call or to send me a WhatsApp or indeed leave me a voice note. 87222 on the text. Make sure you write talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV and I'm back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Well, President Zelensky has arrived at the Munich Security Conference. There was some news from Downing Street earlier saying that apparently Sir Keir Starmer and Volodymyr Zelensky have had a conversation. Brilliant. That's it. Problem solved. Everything's going to be OK. Let's talk now to Colonel Simon Diggins, a brilliant military and defence analyst. Simon, great to have you back on the programme. Let's unpack what's going on here, because we know that Donald Trump has had a conversation with Vladimir Putin. Well, my personal opinion is someone has to speak to him, you know, more Georgia or less war and all of that. But people are up in arms over in Munich about what might have been said. There seems to have been a bit of backtracking from America over whether or not Ukraine can join NATO. What's your take on all of this?
I think what we've had, Alex, and very nice to talk to you as well, is a real dose of realism. After what has up until now been a significant amount of kind of, I won't quite call it fantasy, but kind of delusional aspirations to what's going to go on. I think for a while, certainly since the failure of the Ukraine counteroffensive in 2023, it's been obvious that Ukraine cannot take back the territories which it's lost to Russia since 2014, let alone the stuff that was taken from 2022 onwards. So that's been one of the issues there. And the aspirations towards NATO was never realistic while there was a war going on. I mean, it's actually written in NATO's rules that you can't have a member state joining if they've got disputed borders and or ongoing conflict. So we've had this sort of delusional thinking and speaking by some of our leadership. What Trump has done is come along, and his words are brutal, and his rhetoric is awful, and it offends a lot of people. But he's actually basically introduced a dose of realism. And I have to be honest with you, it's not something we haven't heard before. The Americans have actually been saying the same things to us for a while now, but a little bit more politely. Trump isn't polite, and I think that's what it's upsetting people. But actually, he's telling people the reality.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm so glad you've said that, because I totally agree. It's really ticking me off hearing people standing at that Munich summit saying, oh, well, talking to him is only validating him as a world leader. And, you know, they don't want to have any sort of dialogue. And then they're saying, please, America, please, can you give us weapons? But then Europe says, well, you know, if we allow our own Storm Shadow missiles to be used or this, that and the other, it might provoke him too much. Europe has been all over the place in the beginning about this, on what level of sanctions to apply because they were too intertwined economically with Russia, to what sort of level of weaponry could be given to Ukraine. And they beg America to come along and sort it out because they can't do it themselves. And as soon as America says, right, this is the reality of the situation, they say, no, you're doing it wrong. Macron went and sat around that big white table thinking he was, you know, the big boy in town, ironically. And that was all fine and good. But the minute it's Donald Trump having that conversation, it's terrible. Now, I remember when this war first broke out, the golden phrase that I kept hearing all the time from every single analyst was, two things. Number one, you back Putin in the corner, he's like a rat, a cornered rat. I kept hearing that, if you back him into cornered rat, he's just going to lash out. And the second thing I kept hearing being mentioned was, you've got to build him a golden bridge. Well, surely this is what's going on now.
Yeah, no, I think exactly what's going on. There's a way out, and it's not a comfortable way out. I mean, there's no question about who's in the right and who's in the wrong about this. You know, and Putin's conducted this offensive against Ukraine. But what we've been able to demonstrate for Ukraine is actually your sovereignty is intact, and that's what needs to happen. The territorial borders is painful, but actually that might not be it. But you're absolutely right about the general mood and tenor of the whole thing. Interestingly, Mark Rutte, who's the Secretary General of NATO, and in his opening conversation with J.D. Vance this morning, he said Europe needs to grow up. And I thought, well, that was really good words and strong words and important to him, because I think that's what's going on. And another commentator said, you know, the US security umbrella is in the process of being folded away. You know, basically, we now need to look after our own defence. And that will be difficult for some people to understand, but actually that is the reality.
And I wonder where the Ukrainians are at right now themselves, because I would imagine a fair number of people in Ukraine want this to be over. They don't want to live in perpetual war, in perma-crisis, destroying their economy, killing their loved ones. They want to get back to normal. And if that means sacrificing, let's say, the Donbass, which has been a contested region for a very long time, I'd imagine a vast number of Ukrainians might say, OK, I'm happy with that. The thing that concerns me, though, and I think this is where, you know, getting into the nitty-gritty of geopolitics, where we need to be alive to what Putin's longer game might be, is whether or not he's going to get any more significant coastal territory. He's got Crimea, but what we've seen as a result of this invasion of Ukraine is the wargaming of fertilizer supply, food supply, creating global inflation, the sort of trying to secure maritime bases when you've got Russia controlling the Black Sea, Iran, the Red Sea via the Houthi rebels, South Africa's going crazy. You know, we know that China's trying to pick up all sorts of ports and create their own atolls and islands to control maritime routes. And I think we'd be playing very much into the anti-Western Axis hands if we say to Putin, OK, you can get all of this coastal region.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about the geopolitical ambitions, and they're slow burn. I mean, one thing that the Russians and Chinese are very good at is kind of taking a strategic long-term view. But in terms of preventing the kind of that seizure of the Black Sea, it goes back to, well, the one thing that Zelensky actually has been very clear about is that if there's going to be some kind of peace settlement, then there needs to be, and he called it a strategic non-nuclear deterrent. In other words, their defences and their resources need to be built up to the point whereby Russia will not decide to go back and have a second bite of it after a ceasefire. So along with looking after our own defences, the key to it, if we're going to be responsible European defence leaders and ensure that the security of our own continent, is that we ensure that Ukraine has the resources so that Russia doesn't just use the ceasefire as an opportunity to rest, recuperate, build itself up again, and then go back for a second bite of the cherry. So there's a clear imperative there as well to continue to support Ukraine and develop and build up its own, as you said, a strategic non-nuclear deterrent to deter further aggression.
I mean, what would that look like? Because the big sort of heave-ho has been about whether Ukraine would join NATO. And as you said, it's for the birds at the moment when you've already got a war situation. But also, and this is quite clear, if you're going to get Putin to say, OK, I'm going to pull out of Ukraine, I'm going to negotiate some sort of a truce, his red line is going to be Ukraine cannot join NATO. He's never going to agree to it. I'm certain of that. He's made that very clear. He's made that plain. He's often voiced the fact that he thinks NATO is an aggressive expansionist bloc right on his doorstep. So how would it look then? Let's say that Europe has to now, get together and be part of the defence of Ukraine after any sort of settlement. America says we're not going to put boots on the ground. Perhaps they might supply some sort of, intelligence or weaponry. Perhaps they might even deploy troops there. But how might that look in terms of the funding of our armed forces, and which countries are going to agree to that?
No, I mean, there's, as I said, a huge amount of detail there. But some of the sort of the parts of that program, again, were discussed by President Zelensky when he spoke to European Union last year. He talked in terms, for example, of the Taurus missile, which the Germans have got, which is a long-range missile and very effective. He also talked about acquiring the next generation of the Storm Shadow missile, which the UK has got, in sufficient numbers to provide deterrence. And that whole issue around the communications, intelligence, all those other kind of things, which are not necessarily obvious bits of an effective military, have to continue and continue to be part of as well. So that's part of the equation for the future in terms of equipment.
And but in terms of the political will, because one thing that seems to have torn many European countries apart when it comes to actually acting decisively against Russia, we have it we really don't have much of it at all in the UK. I'd say the vast majority of voters go along with the sort of cross-party consensus that we should help Ukraine. But that isn't the situation in Germany. That isn't really the position of voters there. So which countries might be willing to say, OK, we're prepared to have our troops stationed in Ukraine, a subsection of our troops stationed in Ukraine for a medium term to make sure that things don't kick off again?
No, and it is unfortunately unclear. They'll be very reluctant to put forces in what they see potentially as harm's way. There is a leadership role for the UK there. If the UK is prepared to deploy troops to there, then I think others will follow. Now, whether they go into the front line, into the kind of the actual ceasefire guarding line, I think that may be more problematic. Russia's talked already about neutral countries doing that. And it may well be, I mean, this may be slight speculation, but the recent sort of conversations between Trump and President Modi of India may be part of that. So a neutral country that Russia can work with as on the sort of ceasefire line, but then behind the Europeans providing training, logistics, and also these key weapon systems that would give the Ukrainians a sense that they have got some form of deterrent against further Russian aggression. But it's not what sort of peace is there is actually may well determine who is prepared to support and who's not. If it's just a kind of rather bloody ceasefire, then the chance of putting some interpositional forces there is probably limited. If it's a more general ceasefire, then I think that the chance of it coming up is greater. So there's quite a lot to play for at the moment about where where and how that happens.
Oh, Simon, it's been fantastic listening to you explain all of that, and it's brilliant to actually hear someone being pragmatic and honest about the situation we face, rather than having sort of Trump delusional syndrome, whatever it's called, Trump derangement syndrome. Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, brilliant man. And there you go. You know, it's what I've been saying. The Europeans sort of speak out the side of their face, don't they? They don't want to do anything themselves. They can't sing off the same hymn sheet. They don't take any decisive action. One minute they're sucking up to Putin, enabling all of this. The next minute, when they beg America for help, they don't like America helping. You know, you can't have your cake and eat it, as Marie Antoinette said. Right, OK, let's now give you some good news, shall we? If Rachel Reeves has been dipping her bony fingers in your pockets, well, you might want to enter the following competition. Find out how you could be in a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
There you go. If you are thinking of entering, crack on and good luck. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to give you some traffic and travel updates, as well as your messages and your calls. So if you want to enter the conversation here at the home of common sense, the number to dial is 0344499 1000, standard network rates and all of that. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp as well, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you'd rather use good old-fashioned SMS, 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back after this.
I do worry that the government is getting as closely involved as this in building projects, because, you know, building projects might not be perfect and there might not be the number of construction workers we need to build them, but do we really want the government sort of this closely connected to it?
We've had years and years and decades of poor house building numbers. I mean, last year alone, Mike, there was only 5,995 social houses built.
Yeah.
So we have a massive problem.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. You might have thought strikes were a thing of the past, given that train drivers were given, rail workers in general, given a nice above-inflation pay rise by the current government. But apparently they're not, because Elizabeth line drivers, they're going to strike after rejecting a 4.5% pay rise. Let's speak to Simon Calder, travel guru at The Independent. Hi, Simon. There he is. We can see him, but we can't hear him for some reason. But look, he's always on location. I love Simon. He's such an intrepid he's such an intrepid correspondent. There's Simon. But we're going to try and catch up with Simon because he was there giving us all the information, but for whatever reason, it wasn't travelling to our ears. The audio had gone on strike. But that's okay, because waiting on the line to talk to us about other matters, or perhaps the Elizabeth line, who knows, is David, who, do you know what? Simon's back. We're all over the place this morning, but fear not, we're going to drag it all back into a sensible, orderly manner. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Look, I'm really sorry about the technical problem, entirely my end, and my apologies to you and your lovely listeners and viewers. But I'm here at Britain's busiest railway station. This is London Liverpool Street, and it's just where the Elizabeth line is. Remember, this is a £20 billion piece of infrastructure, so thank you very much to the rest of the country for paying for it. However, the drivers who drive the trains on this east-west line through the heart of the capital aren't happy. They want, well, they've been offered a 5% pay rise, and they want more. Bear in mind, by the way, that fares are going to go up in a couple of weekends' time on the Elizabeth line and all the other railway lines in the UK, or at least in England, by 4.6%. So the drivers want more than that. But here's the thing, Alex. They are not the poorest paid people in London. They are on a basic pay of £72,000. Now, they've been offered well over £75,000, but that isn't enough. And so they will be striking for 4 days at the end of February and then into March, which will, they hope, bring large parts of the capital to a halt and cause mayhem for commuters and visitors to London.
Now, for people listening outside of London, they might be like, well, Elizabeth line, who cares? But is there a risk of this precipitating into further industrial action? Because if they get an above-inflation pay rise and other train drivers think, well, we're not happy with what we got now, we want more, could this then sort of turn into a bit of a snowball effect and we find ourselves, with gridlock and traffic networks grinding to a halt in other parts of the UK?
That's exactly right, Alex, yes. And we've already heard from Mick Whelan, the very effective General Secretary of ASLEF, the Train Drivers Union, that he's basically put the Labour government on notice that when they bring all these train drivers back into one organisation, Great British Railways, and we're going to hear more about that next week, he wants everybody brought up to the highest level. And that will mean very substantial increases for people. It will mean very substantial increases in cost. And while people are no longer paying for the construction of the Elizabeth line, they are, taxpayers, people listening to this, they are paying £400 per second to keep the railways running. The train drivers think we deserve more than that, so it looks as though the amount of subsidy will increase until... And look, I absolutely respect the right of anybody to go on strike and pursue whatever they can, but I think we might be reaching a limit of public tolerance for this kind of malarkey.
Oh, yeah, I mean, definitely. Just a quick question before I let you go, Simon, because it just popped in my head now. When we get Great British Railway, one thing that I notice is, so for instance, if I want to go see my brother who lives in Sussex and I get a last-minute train down to Eastbourne, it costs me in the region of about 35 quid. If I want to get and it takes an hour 45 minutes. If I want to get a last-minute train to go to Gloucester to see my parents, it costs twice as much, but it's exactly the same journey length. Are we going to find fares homogenising?
No, we won't. I've no idea what will happen to fares. I asked the Department for Transport this very question yesterday. What are you doing about fares reform? And look, if you're going to Gloucestershire, that's a kind of slightly intercity journey as opposed to going to Sussex. So you would be expecting to pay a bit more. It's a longer distance. But the whole thing is that the rail fares system is an absolute shambles. For instance, anybody travelling between London and Bristol would be mad to buy a ticket from London to Bristol. Why would you want to do that? You buy a ticket to Didcot Parkway and then another one from there to Bristol, and you're going to save 40% on the deal. It's totally bonkers. Government after government has said they're going to fix things. We will see if Great British Railways manages to sort out the fares. If they do, then you might actually find that the railways begin to turn the corner. But at the moment, it's all looking a bit grim. One good piece of news, the planned strikes on Avanti West Coast, due to take place every Sunday until June, well, they've suspended the next 3. So this coming Sunday and the next 2 Sundays, you will be able to travel normally on the lovely line from London Euston to the West Midlands, North West England and Southern Scotland.
Oh, that is good news indeed, Simon Calder. Thank you ever so much. Travel guru there, a correspondent at The Independent. I wonder if on a Sunday a strike has been cancelled, if they have like a replacement strike service. Who knows? Let's take some of your calls and read some of your messages now. Rattle through some messages first very quickly here because I've got a number of them all starred and waiting to go. Oh, thank you, Russ in Alicante. Oh, you lucky devil. Sunshine, eh, where you are. Have you already hit the lager as well? He says, hi, Alex. Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake. Thomas Cromwell said, you can't have your cake and eat it. Well, do you know what? This is just making me want to eat some cake, and yet I'm on a blimmin' diet. Mike Erith says, NATO, no action, talk only. Pretty spot on there, I'd say. Brian, regarding Ukraine, the UK was in the same situation in 1940 when people wanted us to negotiate with Hitler. Churchill said in 1940 peace with Hitler would mean he will attack later. He said, if the history of our island is to end, let it end only when each and every one of us lies choking in our own blood. We fight on. Well, I think Churchill was right about that, but slightly different geopolitical situation. But look, I'm all for Ukraine. If Ukraine says we want to fight on, fine. But, you know, when we wanted to fight on, when Churchill said that, we did it ourselves, didn't we? We had to pretend we didn't have any aeroplanes, basically. We had to put paper ones up to trick the Germans into thinking that was happening. Someone just said, when did you sell your soul, Alex? I hope it was worth it. Well, I sold my soul after HMRC took most of my bank account. Right, let's speak to David now in Exeter. Hi, David.
Hi, Alex.
Right, what do you want to talk about, my love?
Picking up on what you're discussing with the Ukraine and Pete Hegseth over at Munich Defence Conference post-NATO, he's highlighted a couple of really salient points. And one is he wants to introduce reality back into this defence context in Europe. And I think you and I would both agree, both Europe and the EU and our own government have been asleep at the wheel in terms of coherent defence policy because they've done nothing but cut for so long that it's become habit. The 2 other salient points that he said is, one, that the European leaders need to go back to their peoples and tell them the truth, i.e. that they're at war with Russia. And that's everything other than the shooting, but not where Ukraine is concerned. Obviously, they're shooting there.
Yeah.
And the key bit, you've got to be ready to fight. And I think this is the key thing that he's trying to get over the threshold of understanding here, is because we're seeing a lot of tea and biscuits and a lot of discussion. And where Labour's defence review is concerned, frankly, it's obsolete before it's even published.
Oh, do you know, I'm terrified. This whole idea of you've got to be ready to fight. Essentially, our troop numbers are down to 70,000 from about 120,000 when we protected the Falkland Islands in the 1980s. And turning to the public to say, do you want to fight? I don't know if you saw that survey, a big research project done by The Times over the weekend, where essentially most sort of, you know, Gen Zers don't even like Britain, thinks it's racist, wouldn't stand up for it in a month of Sundays, let alone all these new arrivals begging to stay here. Do you think they're going to stick around and be like, yeah, I was desperate to stay in the UK? No, they'll be on planes back home. It'll just be me and you. That'll be it on the front lines. And I'm not a very good fighter. I got long fingernails though, and I'll give it my best shot.
Well, that's the spirit. I think, particularly, I think where our own defence messaging and posture is concerned, it's been so bad for so long. But really, conversations I've had with senior military officers and defence advisors recently
it's
are
a
saying
mess.
that
Well, they've said even if we get to 2.5%, it ain't going to touch the sides. David, I've got to go because it's the top of the advert break and I'm not allowed to monkey about with the timings on that one. But don't worry, there's still 2 more hours to go after the break. We're carrying on talking about that big security conference in Munich with the former head of the British Army. I will see you just after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or ball slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. That was a bit loud and energetic, almost lost an eardrum after that. Blimey. Poof. I don't know if it was coming out on the airwaves as loud as it came out in the studio and in my little earpiece, but my eyeballs literally rattled around in their sockets then. I thought the vertigo was back. Right, welcome back to the programme. A lot going on today and a lot to discuss. Apparently, I've been looking at breaking news. Old Popey's not well. He's gone into hospital with bronchitis. Hopefully, there'll be the hand of God on his shoulder, making sure he is okay. Let's do some of your messages. I'm going to read this one because this delights me. Joanna in Salisbury says, "Hi, Alex. I'm shocked you're on a diet. There's more fat on a chip than you've got, unless you're hiding it under the desk." That is the thing. You know, I'm one of those people with a deceptively decentish, well, not decentish jawline. I've got a rugby player's neck. Someone once messaged me on Twitter, and I've never forgotten it. But no, I mean, you know, I'm telling you, economic reasons now. Some of the clothes I bought a year ago ain't fitting anymore, my friends. So we've just been having a discussion, actually, me and the producers there, because Ted, my lovely baby-faced Ted, was told that he looked in his 30s, and Ted's about 12 years old. And so he's very upset about this. So he's just come in to bemoan the fact that I can't believe that I look in my 30s. So I just asked the producers, how old do I look? And I got 31, 32. So they've taken 10 years off. That's nice, isn't it? So that's why I wanted to talk about that, because, hey, it's made me feel good today. Now, after all of the happiness and joy of finding out that, yes, I am hiding a Buddha belly under the desk, and also I am 10 years older than I look, let's now go back to more miserable situations and stories, which is this Munich Security and Defence Conference, because yes, it's great that everyone's getting together from around the world to discuss massive issues such as Ukraine. That is the sort of biggest order of the day. And yet you kind of ask yourself, is this going to go anywhere? We've just had the NATO conference. And all I've seen for a long time now when it comes to Europe is they don't agree on anything. Oh, they talk a good talk, but they just sort of constantly contradict themselves. I've been saying this in the first hour of the programme. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I remember it quite vividly, because as a journalist you're reporting on it every day, and I remember it's back when I was at a channel that we don't talk about. I remember saying to people there, you know, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. They said, Alex, you've got to stop doing that geopolitics stuff. Stop doing it. No one cares. And I said, yeah, no, it's going to kick off though. And I was right. But when Russia invaded Ukraine, I remember a number of things happening. First of all, there was a whole sort of flow of, we've got to build Putin a golden bridge. Back him into a corner, and he lashes out. And then there was the UK saying, right, we're going to go and send we're going to send Ukraine missiles, we're going to help them. Boris Johnson, very quick off the mark, saying we need sanctions, we've got to go in hard and defend Ukraine. And yet I remember Germany going, oh yeah, but we kind of want Nord Stream 2. We need Nord Stream 1, but we sort of want Nord Stream 2. And the whole sanctions conversation, you had Hungary and Germany going, well, I don't think we can put sanctions on Russia, really. It took about 6 months for them to do anything. And then, of course, there was the whole situation with Germany saying, well, you can't use any weapons you bought from us to fight the Russians. Now, all of a sudden, when they said to America, please help, this war's going on a long time and we're scared of Putin, and Trump's like, OK, right, I'm getting in there. Don't do that. Don't talk to him. Don't offer him anything. Please give us money. Please give us weapons. And I just think, well, look, I'm not saying that, you know, whatever conversations Putin had with Trump, that I agree with all of it. We don't know what's been said. There could be some tactics at play here. All I'm saying is, you know, Europe should have woken up a long time ago. They've been a disgrace. Anyway, that's my thoughts for the day. But let's speak to someone who actually really knows what he's talking about. Lord Richard Dannett, former head of the British Army. Lord Dannett, brilliant to have you on the programme. OK, let's talk about this conversation between Trump and Putin. We don't know the details of what's been spoken about. There seems to have been some backpedaling over the whole conversation about whether Ukraine will join NATO, at what point. We know they can't join now while there's a war going on anyway. I'd assume it'd be a red line for Putin. But what do you make of this conflab between the two world leaders? Do you welcome it, or are you more in the camp of this sounds like appeasement?
Well, Alex, good morning. To be honest, listening to your introduction, I think you've actually said it all, bless you. But I will do what I can.
I don't know half as much as you, I tell you.
Add to your stream of consciousness. No, I think as far as the conversation, which we understand took place for 90 minutes between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, I think it comes into the completely outrageous category. It would seem that in that conversation, a number of things happened. One is that Putin, who quite rightly has been a pariah in the world's eyes since February 2022, when he illegally and disgracefully attacked Ukraine, has somehow been transformed by Trump into being a statesman that can be taken seriously. And I think that's a terrible move. But I think more to the point, and rather more factually worrying, is that it seems that in that conversation and in other comments that Trump's senior aides have said, that any thought of Ukraine joining NATO is off the table, and that if there are to be negotiations around a ceasefire, that Russian troops will stay as far forward as they have advanced in eastern Ukraine. Now, that's two terrible concessions to make at the start of any possible negotiation. And then even worse, probably, is the fact that this 90-minute conversation took place without involving President Zelensky, and we just absolutely can't countenance, as decent people, the thought that a country like Ukraine could be sold down the Swanee by Trump in a private conversation with Vladimir Putin. That's just not acceptable, and we've got to continue to support Ukraine and realize that they're fighting not just for themselves, but actually they're fighting for our security as well.
What I would say to that is there's going to be a number of people, and you constantly hear all these different opinions going on, and one of those is, well, you push Putin too hard, he might use a tactical nuclear weapon. This might escalate things. This might actually lead to greater conflagration. And then there are those saying this is a war of attrition now. It's sort of grinding on. Territory keeps moving around, changing hands. Russia's on the back foot, then Ukraine's on the back foot. The death toll is possibly up to 1 million. There'll be a lot of Ukrainians who want this to end, and people saying, we need to find a way to unpick this situation. So if that's the case, I mean, is it realistic to say if we just give Ukraine everything they need? First of all, can we afford it? Most of the economies in Europe are strapped for cash. Second of all, there's elections coming up in Germany. There's elections coming up in France in the near-ish future. A lot of the electorates in that country just don't really support the idea of their countries giving resources to Ukraine. So you've got the political chokehold on decision-making as well. Is it, in an ideal world, great. Wouldn't it be fantastic? We can throw whatever Ukraine needs. Ukraine can beat Russia. Putin's toppled from power. The next leader who follows Putin isn't a nut job from the KGB, and the world can be a peaceful place. But is that realistic?
No, it's not realistic, and we don't live in an ideal world. In fact, we don't live in anything half resembling an ideal world. It's a pretty ugly and brutal world that we live in. But I think just flip to the other side of the coin, Alex. If we give Putin an easy ride here, if we allow a ceasefire agreement to come into force, which allows Russian troops to stay at their line of advance, then over the next 2 or 3 years, the Russians may well reconstitute their military force and then press again somewhere else. Because bear in mind, Putin's interest is not just acquiring Ukraine. He wants to revisit the greater Russia of his youth. Let's face it, he's an unreformed KGB colonel whose beloved Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact were defeated in 1989 by the combined strength of NATO and the West. He would love to see that situation reversed. So we've just got to accept we're not in an ideal world. So what are we going to do? Well, we've got to go on supporting Ukraine, even though the pain for Ukraine will continue to be huge. We've got to, and I think your previous correspondence and discussions were focusing on this as well, we have got to, in this country and in other European countries, significantly increase our spending on defence, bearing in mind that the Americans want to focus more on the Indo-Pacific, and frankly, I don't blame them because China is a threat to them. So we in Europe have got to step up to the plate much more. Forget 2.5% of GDP to be spent in this country on defence. 3.5% are nearer the mark. And Donald Trump talked about 5%. Now, he didn't just pluck that figure out of the air. That's what we were spending in the late 1980s during the Cold War. And funny old thing, at that level of defence expenditure, we brought a level of deterrence that meant the Cold War never went hot. We should be getting back to that sort of situation again to make sure that not only can we support Ukraine in an honourable way and with integrity, but actually we can play our part along with other European countries in preserving the security of Europe.
I mean, the difficulty, I agree with everything you're saying. I think we've been far too flabby when it comes to committing to defence spending. We've gone so far backwards when it comes to troop numbers from where we were at in the 1980s. But now, we've gone so far into decline that people are saying that even if we hit that 2.5% target, and there doesn't seem to be a realistic economic pathway with this government on how we get there, given that we've constantly got, £22 billion black holes, that won't even touch the sides.
It won't even touch the sides. I mean, go back to the point I was just making. 5% is probably about the figure that we ought to be aiming to. Now, you can't expect any government to go to 5% just overnight. But if there was a pathway set out that would grow us from where we are now through 2.5 to 3 to 3.5% over the next 5 to 10 years, then defence planners can start to let contracts to British industry, can start to build an increase in our defence capability to both the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and to our more sophisticated technologies in cyber and cyberspace and so on. And therefore we've got a path towards a greater degree of military capability and a stronger deterrence. It can't be done overnight, but it needs to be set out clearly that that's the ambition and that's the intent. The Ukrainians are buying us time we mustn't waste that time. We've probably got 2 or 3 years to begin to significantly increase our military capability so that we can look after ourselves and play our part as a European member of NATO in protecting European security. That's the challenge for today. Frankly, if Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves choose to continue to prioritise important things like health, social care, schools, education, national infrastructure, and not spend an increased amount of money on defence, they would be failing in their first duty of government, namely to look after the security of this country. And frankly, if Keir Starmer can't find the statesmanship within himself to do that, frankly, he consigns himself to the bin of history, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and he consigns us to war. That is the problem we face here. I don't understand why the case isn't made a lot more that actually people bang on the left, the military-industrial complex. Actually, building up your defence can have an amazing impact on jobs creation. They talk about how the green energy transition is going to create thousands of jobs, probably in Beijing. Thank you very much. But we could actually really bolster our economy if we were to invest in defence. Anyway, I want to get you to be an arbiter of something, if you wouldn't mind, because two very good friends of mine had a bit of a ding-dong on this channel earlier. It's a clip that's gone viral on the internet, and I can't pick a side because they're both very dear to me, so I'm going to let you do that. Let's play the moment that Julia and Richard Tice go head-to-head.
It's Russia that's killing people. If Russia stopped fighting, if Russia wanted to end the war, if Russia stopped fighting, Russia could just stop fighting. There wouldn't be a war. No one would be killed.
And that would be great.
Our job done.
Yeah,
well, why doesn't the West take that to Russia?
Ultimately, maybe that's what the negotiations are.
Which part of Britain would you give away if we were invaded and you wanted to negotiate peace?
None at all.
Oh, so we wouldn't give away any of Britain.
But
it's okay to give away a bit of Ukraine. I just thought Reform cared about national borders.
We do absolutely care about national borders and sovereignty.
Not all of them. Okay.
But equally, we don't want to carry on killing people. We're not killing people. But ultimately, somehow, the war has got to stop. It's gone on for 3 years. How long do we keep it going? A decade? 2 decades?
How long would you fight for this country?
Until I'm dead.
Well, exactly. That's what Ukrainian people would ideally do if they were given support.
I mean, the problem I've got here, Richard, is both of them seem to be right.
Well, yes, you pose a very interesting question. Of course, it's just what I was saying before. We don't live in an ideal world, but I'm afraid we've got to do what I was suggesting earlier, is continue to support Ukraine, because it's not just in the interests of Ukraine, it's in the interests of our own security and the security of Europe. Yes, we shouldn't allow Russia to take over parts of eastern Ukraine. Well, they've captured them, but we shouldn't just willy-nilly allow them to stay there. And the argument often is, would we give away Kent and Sussex? Well, maybe we would, but actually we shouldn't. The eastern Ukraine is sovereign Ukrainian territory, and even if there is a ceasefire, we shouldn't recognise Russian sovereignty over that territory. It remains Ukrainian.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer has apparently spoken to Volodymyr Zelensky and said that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO. I was having a conversation earlier with Colonel Simon Diggins, who said, well, yes, this is all hypothetical, because while a country's at war, it's within the NATO treaty that they cannot then access to full membership of NATO. There's also the school of thought that, well, if you want to negotiate anything with Putin, if that is the direction of travel to be taken, it will be a red line. There's the school of thought that actually allowing Ukraine to join NATO will be a red flag to a bull and potentially precipitate further war, be read as an act of aggression. And then, of course, there'll be people who say, well, that's great, but, Ukraine's been pretty much pulverised. We're getting someone in who's going to cost us quite heavily if we have to leap to their defence. What do you see the future of the Ukraine-NATO argument looking like?
Well, Simon Diggins is right that under the NATO constitution, a country that's in dispute with a neighbour isn't allowed to join. But at some point in the future, we would like to hope and work towards that dispute being settled, at least settled for the time being. I think Ukraine, it needs one of two things. It either needs to be allowed to join NATO at some point in the future and given a cast iron guarantee that there is a path for that to happen, or if that is deemed not possible, then there need to be cast iron guarantees by European countries, and ideally the United States as well, to protect Ukraine's sovereign integrity in the future. Ukraine deserves those kind of assurances. It's fighting a bloody war as I said so many times in the last 20 minutes, not just for itself, but for European security, that they deserve that kind of assurance, either from NATO as an institution or from other countries bilaterally, ourselves, the Americans, the French, the Germans, and others, that we will protect Ukraine, because Ukraine is fighting, as I said so many times, for our security as well as theirs.
It's been fantastic catching up with you, Lord Richard Dannett, their former head of the British Army, a man who definitely knows a thing or two about war. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back after the break, it's time for your calls and your messages. So if you want to hear your sonorous tones ring out on the airwaves, the number to dial is 03444 499 1000. You can use that number to send me a voice note on WhatsApp, or indeed just send me a message on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. We're on X at talkTV. I'm back after this.
Has Donald Trump just avoided World War III by starting these peace talks with Vladimir Putin, allowing him to come in from the cold and trying to get the carnage to end? Or has he made World War III more likely?
With what has come out publicly at the moment, World War III is significantly more likely. And
interesting phrase there. What has come out publicly?
Because what we're doing is we're analysing this from a 2D perspective. This is a 3D, but more likely 4D, 5D or 6D game of chess that's going on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. I was just trying to scan through your messages during the break, and there's so many of them. I can't even get the tip of the iceberg, seriously. But let's see what we've got here from what I've scanned through already. Kevin in Stafford says, Alex, why is everybody making so much of a 90-minute conversation between Trump and Vlad? Has nobody heard of translators? Doesn't Donald J. Trump speak fluent Russian? Does Vlad speak with a New York accent? Giving the rambling speeches of both of them, the 90 minutes would be about 3 bits each, then 6 bits from each of the translators involved. Yeah, That's pretty much true when you listen to them. Do you remember when Tucker Carlson did that interview with Putin? We all sort of thought, well, we don't necessarily agree with him doing it, but we're going to tune in anyway. And after like a sort of, 3-hour-long history lesson of Russia, it was just boring, wasn't it? It was like, oh, what is this drivel? And same with Donald Trump. When he does his campaign speeches, they're really captivating. But because he just repeats himself, and it takes about 2 hours for him to actually make his first point. So what that conversation would look like, yeah, it's bad times, it's bad stuff. It's bad stuff, Vladimir. Cost you bigly. Bad stuff. Okay, yeah, thanks for telling us about, back in 1233 under Vlad the Impaler. I mean, you do have to wonder what went on in that conversation. A very good point. And here we go. How would we know what Ukrainians want? They've had no elections for years, says Chris in Brighton. Well, true, but I'd imagine most ordinary people listening to us talk about it on the airwaves here and going, we've got to keep arming Ukraine to continue this war because they're doing the hard work for us, and probably going, yeah, thanks for that. I want to be able to buy my bread, send my kids to school. I want my wife back from Poland and to be able to be a painter decorator once again. But I don't know. Now, someone else has said, why can't we put all single migrants who want to come here into the military for 5 years? This would help instill British values and maybe stop illegals. I'm afraid if you put all of those men coming over from the Middle East on boats, breaking into the country illegally, coming out of countries controlled by ISIS and the Taliban and all of that lot, you said, here you go, have some guns. I don't think they're going to be using them to defend this country, right? I mean, I like the idea, but they're not coming over here because they want to buy into Project Britain, and making them do some press-ups and go over a few obstacle courses is suddenly going to make them sing God Save the King. You give them, give them access to the military. Bad news. Right. Why are we even talking about the security of our nation and Europe when we're allowing tens of thousands of unvetted young men to invade us every year? Exactly. I was just saying this to Ted. I was like, it's all good and well saying, well, if we do this, it might stop Russia here and then China there and Okay, we're basically sending a giant charity check to China while we close down all of our own power stations and self-flagellate on the altar of Greta Thunberg, and allow China to control critical infrastructure and make loads of money by sticking up windwalls and solar panels. Until you can make a solar panel sandwich, I don't think it's a good idea to get rid of farmland for that. Mental. So we're doing all of this absolutely bonkers stuff. Don't get me started on the food security thing. It is insane. And we can't even tell a paedophile to go back from whence he came, the ECHR, and then we think we're going to be able to defend ourselves. It's just madness. I'm afraid I just kind of think we're doomed. Anyway, keep your messages coming in. I'm going to try and get through more of them. Let's go to some calls now and speak to Georgina, who's in London. Hi, Georgina.
Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
Well, I got up this morning and I was in quite a good mood, and then I switched on the television, and it's one problem after another. I mean, this Rachel Reeves woman who is looking after our finances has got some sort of self-destruct button, I think. I wouldn't usually praise the BBC, but well done to them for bringing this scandal to the wider attention of the British public. The lies that are being told are totally relentless from the Labour Party. She lied on her CV saying she'd worked at the Bank of England for a decade, when in point of fact, it was half of that.
Right.
She was fiddling finances whilst at the Halifax, going for meals costing £400. Now, I don't know about you, but that's probably a monthly shopping for most people at Tesco's,
right.
Yeah. Buying perfumes, handbags and gifts for friends with money from the Halifax and putting it down to expenses.
Yeah.
And now this woman is, the
Chancellor. I know, but this is what you make a really good point. Not only is she seemingly dishonest, the problem I've got with a lot of these people that I think is even worse than not having integrity is they don't have intelligence. They're really thick. They're so stupid. This woman is sticking her hand in the company till, allegedly, to buy gifts for her bosses.
Yeah,
what?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We've got a government here who are experts in the art of deflection, where questions are concerned. You can't even get a straight yes or no to a basic question. The taxpayers are literally being bled dry with taxes.
I know.
They're being raised left, right and centre, whilst the Prime Minister has spent approximately £700,000 on flights around the world on trips that are not going to forward the UK's financial economy.
Well, this is the problem. The Labour Party, they're even worse than Conservatives before them. The Labour Party believe pumping money into the public sector is a good idea, jobs for the boys and all that. We have got such a mess in our economy. We need drastic action. We need to either doge the heck out of everything, or go over to Melee and say, oh, can we borrow your sort of metaphorical chainsaw and start massively cutting apart the civil service because it's massively bloated. You know, I'm going to be, I don't know, it's controversial whether people are going to agree with this, but if it was me, frankly, and I was Prime Minister right now, I'd be like, right, we really need to save a heck of a lot of money. Yeah, it was fun having the Senedd. Yeah, it was fun having that Parliament up in Scotland, but do you know what? Costs a lot of money, doesn't really give much return on investment. I'd have a look at all those quangos and go, do you know what? You got 70 people doing the job of just one minister. And I would just, you know, massively cut back government and say all of that now goes to the private sector. Those people who actually know how government works, they're actually quite intelligent people. Go out there and earn money. Go and build this economy. And let's have factories churning out stuff. We used to be brilliant when it came to the automotive industry. We've still got all the brains to do that. We just don't have the factories because they have to be, I don't know, run off some sort of windmill in the garden.
That's not going to happen.
Exactly. I know it's not. Well, you know, let's just see. At some point, you never know, a government of the future might just come in and be like full on Trump and go, this is how to save Britain. This lot ain't going to do it. Yeah,
I mean, we're being led into a financial oubliette here that we're not going to be able to get out of. It's an absolute disgrace. This party is hanging on for grim death by the skin of its teeth with one scandal after another, just trying to shrug off any responsibility for their corrupt and clandestine actions.
Georgina,
it's not good enough.
Georgina, you've been amazing to talk to. And also, amazing bringing the word oubliette back into my life. I haven't heard that in about 5 years. Oubliette. That's this sort of old medieval French thing where it's a form of French torture. You know, they love all that stuff, like guillotines and stuff. The oubliette is some sort of box that you just put someone in and forget about them. And, like, you know, you just sort of turn into a skelly bob in some sort of, you know, dungeon somewhere. Anyway, brilliant word, oubliette. Let's speak to James, who is also in London. Hi, James.
Hiya, Alex. Alex, I agree with you on what's happening in Ukraine. We've got all these military experts that have got everything wrong since the fall of the Soviet Union are telling us that if there is a peace deal where the deaths will stop, then Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia will be next. The Russian Empire will take on NATO when it can't even take on Ukraine. It's been fighting them for 3 years. And we're supposed to expect the Russians are now expected to take on 32 NATO members if they go into those three countries, or Poland, because Article 5 will be invoked. I am sick to the death of it. We need peace in that country. We've got countries like Germany who are still buying Russian gas, but they're buying it from India because India buys it from Russia and sells it to Germany. Yeah, and I'm sick to the back teeth. Ukraine, the people who are telling you to fight on are the same people that can't even control what's going on their own borders.
No, you're right. I agree with a lot of what you say. I mean, look, I'm on both sides of the fence here, and believe me, you can be. You can think Putin's awful. You can want Putin to get his just desserts. You want Europe to be ready to fight Putin and push him back in the corner, and that more than anything needs to be done economically, right? But you can also say, right, we can't have a war of attrition either. There are various ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and I think that there is a way of saying to Putin, right, ceasefire now, this stops, Donbass, OK, but no troops there. And then say to Ukraine, OK, we're going to make sure that you've got a huge militarised wall to prevent Russia getting back in. We're going to help with that. There'll be weapons. We'll be on call to jump in. Don't have to join NATO just yet, but we're going to have our own treaty, our own peace agreement that if Russia comes in, we're going to go after them and make sure that Russia knows that. And meanwhile, stop Russia fooling around, going through oceans, cutting electricity cables. Get real. And a lot of getting real is how you trade with people. Trump has said tariff is his favourite word. And yet we're there. You know, China, massively in the same camp as Russia. And the whole net zero thing, we're basically just saying to China, let's build up your economy while we destroy ours. It's
Absolutely right.
nonsensical. It's very simple. If a country's self-sufficient, there's been this new massive gas field that's been discovered in Derbyshire. Massive, this thing. I can't remember the exact details, but I think it could power the UK for about 10 years.
150 years.
And we could, how was it, 150?
150 years.
There you are, you know the detail. And if we sold that gas, it would make us how much money? It's like 120 something billion, or I wish I had that story printed out in front of me. Anyway, we've got a load of gas. And if you look at the grid over the last couple of days and look at what percentage of our energy was coming from gas or coming from wind or coming from... It's all still coming from gas. It's just gas we're buying from other places, which, like you said, buy it from Russia and repackage it. You couldn't make this stuff up. It's balmy.
My last point is the French state has done more damage to this country in the last 15 years than the Russians could ever do.
How so?
By flooding us with illegal migrants from their shores, weakening our state, taking money from our people. If these people weren't here, then the elderly would have had their winter allowances and we wouldn't be in the poorhouse.
Well, do you know, you are absolutely right. And I'm sitting there thinking they all meet in Munich, don't they, to discuss security. The day after yet another terror attack in Germany. Is anyone discussing the open borders and the fact that we've got Lord knows how many terrorists now roaming around Europe, funding big, you know, militant terrorist organisations in the Middle East to enable this trafficking and make their dollar from it? No, we're just going to hand-wring instead. Brilliant to talk to you, James. Absolutely fantastic. Let's take a short break now. When I come back on the subject, actually, of migrants and people coming into the country and what are they doing being allowed to stay here, we're going to be catching up with my old friend Stephen Wolfe. He's a former MEP and director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Ted's come in and given me some really good ammo here about Ed. I love going after Ed Miliband. Has that man still not recovered from his cold yet? I mean, seriously, can someone get in some Beckonase and some Vicks? He's terrible to listen to. As is Rachel Reeves, as is Keir Starmer. I say this a lot, actually. How come a qualifying condition to be in the cabinet of the Labour Party is to have nasal congestion? I don't know, it baffles me. Or Lego hair. Apparently he's the only one, Ed Miliband, the only one who's got a heat pump at his home. They've been saying everyone needs to have heat pumps at their home. This is the way forward. But apparently none of the other 21 cabinet ministers approached by the Telegraph, including the Prime Minister, would confirm if they had one of the devices or were planning to install one. The government wants 600,000 heat pumps to be fitted every year by 2028 to meet net zero targets, but the numbers are 1/10 of that. Encouraging households, Mr Miliband has extended subsidies of £7,500 while imposing a requirement for boiler manufacturers to sell increasing numbers of heat pumps every year or face fines. I don't know much about heat pumps, frankly. They probably don't work. I don't know if they do. Apparently they cost, here you go, 12 grand if it's bought without subsidy, compared to 3 grand for a gas boiler. Why don't we just get that gas from under Derbyshire and the North Sea? Why don't we just, get to fracking? I don't get it. We could be a rich little nation. We could be like the Azerbaijan of Europe if we decided to get the black stuff and the gaseous stuff out of our own shores. But no, instead we've got to, bow down at some horrific iconograph of Greta and just basically die. Anyway, let's talk about another big problem which the UK has, as much of Europe has, which clearly is, well, not just a big problem, utterly fatalistic, suicidal empathy, as the brilliant Professor Gadsard would call it. And this is, yet again, another situation where a migrant has come up with some nonsensical, pure drivel, baloney reason for why they should stay in this country. I mean, they're just gaslighting us now. They're trolling us. And the judge has gone, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to have to let you stay. Now, this is the case of a Ghanaian who's won the right to stay in Britain after staging a fake marriage. She said she was going to marry some German guy who lived over here, whose name doesn't exactly sound Anglo-Saxon. And they didn't even get married. They sort of staged some sort of remote marriage via Zoom or something. She was in Kumasi, he's over in the UK. So they've not actually been face-to-face, which is just clearly a nonsense. Francisca Boateng, that's her name. But she's won her immigration appeal after claiming the proxy marriage to a German citizen lasted long enough to qualify her to remain in the UK. Now, not only this, she came on holiday to Britain, where she met Fateo Sualihu, a German citizen, before returning home to divorce her husband at the time. She organised this proxy wedding in Kumasi in Ghana. Neither of them actually went to it. She moved to the UK with her 2 children to join her new husband. But guess what? The marriage broke down straight away and she instituted divorce proceedings, which concluded in January 2022. Oh, here comes the blimmin' bride and off she goes again. But she didn't go, did she? She's still here. It's madness. Let's speak to Stephen Wolfe, former MEP and director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, I can't anymore. Whether it's children not being able to eat chicken nuggets, a pedo who needs to be close to his children, or some Ghanaian who faked a wedding. I mean, it just gets more and more farcical. But the problem is with all of this, we may go, well, this is not good, or it's not good for the economy. I'm worried with who some of these people are and what their intentions are, especially when you see what's been going on in Germany.
If Shakespeare was writing us, we'd be called the madness of fools. It's quite simply, that's what we are. We're foolish and we're mad for allowing this to actually happen day in, day out. And the public now can see, as you said, the last four cases that have just come up over the last few days. Here we have proxy marriage, no one actually attends, and yet a Ghanaian is allowed to stay here despite getting divorced a few months later. If anyone was going to think about that logically, most people would say that sounds a bit fraudulent, but we're not even allowed to say that anymore because we'd get into trouble. We have Palestinians trying to get into the country, as you said, on the right to be here because you're Ukrainian. If you don't like your chicken nuggets in the hometown land of your father, then you can also stay. The madness of fools. But then, as you point out, we also have 5 instances in the last year in Germany where Afghans who are asylum seekers, Afghans who are attempted to be deported, and other individuals who have created terrorist acts. So what have we got here? I think we've got dangerous people hiding in our own shadows. And I think we should be very worried about it.
I think we should be very worried about it indeed, especially when you look at statistics which are published in other countries and kept suppressed here, or not collected or collated, who knows. But for instance, looking at a survey in Norway, the capital Oslo, when they sort of took a sample size of 1,000 Somalians, 1 in 2 of them, 50% of them, had committed violent crime. If you're looking at organised crime, basically all Albanian gangs in the UK, looking at sex crimes, 3 times more likely to be raped or sexually assaulted by someone foreign born than someone born here. And that's looking at the data of prison inmates from 2024. You look at, crimes across Europe now. In France, there's about 126 stabbings every single day now going on in France. In Germany, there are 2 gang rapes every single day. And when you look at the statistics in all of these countries, these are not the native-born population. This is what terrifies me. We have no idea. Look, that is not to say people coming from whatever country, whether it's the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Americas. It's not saying that all these people are criminals and we need to be xenophobic or racist about this, but it is pointing out that actually if you are a criminal and you want to exploit the system, if you are a terrorist and you hate the West, guess what? We cannot tell if you're a good guy or a bad guy, but you'll still have the red carpet rolled out for you.
And that is the biggest concern. This is why we have a breakdown in society, because what you have now is such large numbers of people that have entered the Western countries that you and I have just quoted a number of pieces of data. But the amount of data that I have to try and review is now going out the window because it's just too much. There's just too much when we look at healthcare issues, when we look at mental health, when we look at the impact of immigration and population on housing, when we look at on schools, when we're looking at in terms of crime. The very fabrics of our nation are breaking down because we're morphing to smaller and smaller communities of people that have come across from different areas and said, I'm going to stick with my community. I'm going to stick with the Afghans. I'm going to stick with the Iranians. I'm going to stick with the Somalians. And then we realize that the countries that we've landed to aren't lands of milk and honey. Yes, we're getting free benefits. Yes, we're getting free houses. But I thought I was going to get that big car. I thought I was going to get the big TVs. And suddenly, you know that it's easier to get involved in crime. And crime per capita of those populations are what we're seeing rising. And that's what should concern us more, because we will then be faced with a very, very clear situation, as we saw only last year or 18 months ago, where you have Pakistanis and Indians in Leicester fighting one another. And we've seen Somalians and Poles in other areas of the country. That breakdown could lead to our own form of civil war, as someone has recently written in the last couple of days.
I know
who's
the
a
piece.
war expert.
Oh my goodness, I know exactly the piece. The first thing I said when I came in this morning, I spoke to my producer Ted and said I listened to this amazing podcast, Louise Perry. I've got exactly the article. I'm not going to find it actually because it's really it's worth talking about. He is one of the UK's most renowned, from Canada originally, one of the UK's most renowned experts when it comes to the study of civil wars in the modern era. David Betts, he is at King's College in London, and he has looked at what the preconditions are for mass civil unrest and civil war around the world. Now, this isn't someone who's sort of, taking a political stance or trying to stoke up violence. He is an expert. And he has done a big report and said, the UK has all the preconditions for that to happen. And Absolutely. You can see it. You can see it. You just have to have a little look at the internet and see what's going on in places like Liverpool, what's going on in Middlesbrough, what's been going on over in Ireland. You look at how our armed forces are diminished. Most of our police don't really carry any weapons. And you think, we're a tinderbox, and it could go off. And it's so, so frightening.
And it is frightening. And David, as I understand it, is not regarded as being of the right wing. He's more towards the left or the liberal left. And in fact, he warns about the language that we use in that article and his follow-on piece to come, which is about the concerns that we will have this form of interaction between groups that could lead to a civil war, because it will first of all have one group against another. And what I see here in this country is that at the moment, our security services and our political bodies, and particularly the political party of the Labour Party, are saying that one of the groups that are beginning to face that, which is the white working class communities, they're the ones who are the racists. and yet they're the ones who are seeing their communities being attacked the most. We noticed that during the issue of Southport. Thousands of them were arrested, charged, and many of them imprisoned for offences that we now look at, and we talked about this morning. Similar types of people are being able to get Article 8 of the Human Rights Act to keep them out from being deported.
Yeah.
That two-tier criminal system is now intensifying the arguments that could lead to this civil war within our own country.
And you know what, we're talking about Southport and the riots there, I was speaking to my other half, and we both sort of said, look, they were ghoulish, they were horrible, and it felt very, very edgy. But by and large, when you saw those compared to what had gone before in Hare Hills was, in my mind, bigger. But because it was done by a certain community, there didn't seem to be any repercussions. Stephen, thank you ever so much. Blimey, I'm glad you brought up that Civil War thing. I mean, I wasn't actually going to do it on the programme, but it's been on my mind. Barely slept last night thinking about it. First thing I said when I came into the newsroom this morning, has anyone seen this report? I'll have a think about whether I do it as an actual piece on a future show. It's sort of one of those, tread carefully, you don't want to give people ideas. Right, if you want to get in touch with the programme, 03444 499 1000 is the number to call, or indeed send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. You can text me 87222. Right, talk before your message. I am on X at talkTV, and I am back after this.
I would suggest no appeals, but all right, 8 times. And she was told, well, look, you're never going to make it. So what she did, you won't believe this, what she did, she joined a Nigerian terrorist group.
What is it, Boko Haram?
No, they're called the Indigenous People of Biafra.
That was my second guess.
Yeah. They're a separatist group. She
Right.
joined them in 2017 because although they're a prescribed banned group in Nigeria, they're not banned here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, they almost caught me in the act there, seeing if I could scan Open Table if there was a restaurant available for Valentine's dinner tonight, because I bet my bottom dollar my boyfriend hasn't booked anything. You know what men are like. We love them, but they're kind of useless. Now, there's been some breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, which is that Starmer has been speaking to Donald Trump. Buckle yourselves in. This is a wild ride. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Trump last night to discuss his forthcoming visit to the US. He discussed the visit with the president and welcomed Washington's special envoy to the UK, Mark Burnett. The Downing Street spokeswoman said the Prime Minister was pleased to host President Trump's special envoy to the United Kingdom, Mark Burnett, at Downing Street, during which he took a call from President Trump and discussed his forthcoming visit. Yeah, I know, I told you it was a wild ride, didn't I? But what can you expect from the world's least charismatic man? And I don't mean Donald Trump. Well, what you might expect, if you are listening carefully, is tariffs. It's his favourite word, apparently. And potentially Britain could be, put on notice because Donald Trump has vowed to impose tariffs on countries that charge VAT, leaving Britain at risk of a £24 billion blow to its economy. The US president issued the warning on Thursday as he laid out his plan for reciprocal tariffs. He said, "I've decided for purposes of fairness that I will charge a reciprocal tariff. It's fair to all. No other country can complain." But it's not yet clear whether Britain will be specifically singled out by Trump, as the US vowed to address each country one by one. I mean, he tends to be using these tariffs as a diplomatic tool more than anything. The UK government will no doubt seek to negotiate to avoid tariffs, which could lead to a 21% levy on goods exports to the US if the president targets Britain's VAT changes. Now, never before have I been so excited about tariff conversations as I am in the current New World Order, but I don't know enough about it. So let's speak to Adam Coleman, who's a columnist at the New York Post. Hi, Adam, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Now, we talk a lot about the special relationship, and we kind of hope that, Trump doesn't seem to like the EU. Guess what? Neither do I. Keir Starmer, slightly different opinion on that one. And we sort of hope that, maybe he might sort of make an exception to the rule when it comes to us. What do you think?
I think that Trump is making good on what he said from the very beginning. He said, I would even say from his first term, if people listen to what he was saying, that even our allies are ripping us off. They're not paying their fair share when it comes to NATO, and they're getting unfair trade deals with us, and America is losing the benefits from it. I think we've had too many people who stayed in our government who don't value what the United States has, and they've given a lot away for free. They've created trade deals that somehow benefit the person that's making the deal in the United States, but not the American people. And there's a obvious trade imbalance. And what he's doing now is using tariffs as a way to get their attention and come to the table. And he's done that multiple times when it came to illegal immigration with Canada, Colombia, Mexico. So tariffs just it gets their attention, right? It's the big ask. He says, I'm going to do a 10%, 25% tariff. They say, hold on a second. And then they actually start the negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's absolutely fascinating is America is one of our biggest trading partners, and we have no free trade agreement with America, by and large, in a sort of reverse direction. Obama used it as a stick to hit us with during Brexit. He said, well, if you leave the EU, you're going to be back at the queue for negotiating a trade deal with us. Whereas Donald Trump has always liked the idea of Brexit. He's good mates with Nigel Farage. He basically said kind of the opposite, front of the queue. We want to do great trade with Britain, but unfortunately, the leftists in the UK, this lot now running the country, all started screaming about chlorinated chicken. And imagine there's going to be a load of people from US medical insurance companies chasing ambulances with clipboards, which is for the birds, quite frankly. But their tune has changed somewhat. And it seems to me that one of the ideas now is to send King Charles over on a charm offensive to the US to help smooth out diplomatic relations. We know President Trump loves the royal family. Is there still a way to salvage a special relationship? And if there is, what sort of things might Trump be asking of Britain? What sort of conditions might there be to make sure that these tariffs don't come?
Well, I would actually want to address one thing. I don't think our relations are being hindered. I don't think this is like a breakdown or anything like that. This is a reconvening. What they want to do is say, listen, we like you guys. We have no problem with you. We're not about to go to war or anything like that. And he doesn't want to have a trade war with the UK. What he's saying is, let's go over this. If we're supposed to be mates, let's go over this and actually come up with something fair, because right now it seems like you're getting the better end of this deal. And we need to come up with something where we both sacrifice something rather than you get all the leverage and we get none. So I don't think this is a diplomatic issue. I don't even think that, Trump is saying we should no longer deal with anything with the United Kingdom. He said specifically, I'm going to every single country, and we're not taking our relationship for granted with either one of them, or allowing that previously good relationship to be something that keeps us from fairness. So he said from the very beginning, this is about fairness. And it's not just for us, but it's also for you as well. But it seems like there's an unfair balance when it comes to other countries trading with the United States.
Brilliant. Thank you for your perspective, Adam Coleman, columnist at the New York Post. It looks like we're at a Lib Dem convention. We're both sort of sitting there in yellow. Blimey. Do you know what? It's interesting. I was listening to the radio this morning, and an American commentator said, when Trump is saying, I want tariffs, what he's saying is, I actually want free trade, but I'm going to use this as the threat. It's a negotiating chip. You cannot put tariffs on us and not expect them to be put back at you. And hopefully, in doing that, you actually pave the way to have a proper free trade deal, to really sort of lubricate commerce in a way that's beneficial for everybody. Right, taking a short break now. Don't go anywhere. I am back just after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. This is it, the final hour. It's been a riveting ride so far. Well, it has for me. You might have all tuned out. Well, you haven't, because you're listening out, aren't you? But I don't know who I've lost along the way. Or maybe I've gained some of you. Who knows? They'll tell me when I come out of the booth, that's for sure. Let's get back to it, shall we? Because the debate's going on. The Munich Security Conference is going on. Breaking news is that, Zelensky doesn't think that there is a peace plan yet coming from the US. We know that there's been a 90-minute conflab between Putin and Trump. The Europeans going, why wasn't Ukraine involved in that? This is appeasement. This is all very terrible. But yeah, we don't know what they've really agreed. We heard some stuff about, well, Ukraine must be allowed to join NATO, and then, oh, that's definitely not going to be allowed. And then the US sort of backpedaling on that a little bit. But we also know it's not realistic, because while there's an active war going on, you can't join NATO. We also know if there's going to be any kind of negotiation with Putin, that it would probably be one of his red lines. And then we're told, well, you can't negotiate with Putin. That's actually appeasement. He's come in and invaded a country, and you're just letting him get away with it if you then say, come and sit around the table like you're a sensible statesman. But so what do you do then? You just carry on having the war, on and on and on, this war of attrition. And then Europe's like, no, 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 we must beat Putin. And you go, OK, right, so Germany, you send your missiles over. We don't want to do that, not ours. Oh, if it's our missiles being used in Russian territory, no, we can't do that. Oh, you push the Russian bear too hard, it snaps back. Might use a tactical nuclear weapon, might bomb us. Oh, can't do that. They say, OK, right, we really need to throw some serious sanctions at Russia. Yeah, but the thing is, economically, that's not really going to work out for us, I'm afraid. OK, so how about we go in there and we give Ukraine as much money as they need to be able to... Well, we've got elections coming up next week, and I don't think our voters are going to like it. So, America, can you help? And Trump comes in and says, right, I'm in. The first thing I'm going to do as president is try and make sure there is peace. I'm going to get on the phone to Putin right now. You can't do that. You disgust me. And yet at the same time, at the outbreak of this war, there was little mini Macron sitting around that massive white table having a chat in the Kremlin. Make it make sense. Well, let's speak to somebody who's going to know better than anybody else what the situation is, what might be a way out of this if there is one, what Zelensky himself might say if he were at the table negotiating right now, and what is best for Ukraine, and that is Igor Novikov, because he is former advisor to President Zelensky. Igor, thank you so much for coming on the programme. You're such a valued guest at this moment in time to talk to us about this. What is your view on this 90-minute conversation that's taken place between Trump and Putin?
Well, first and foremost, I have to mention one thing. I mean, this war's been going on for 3 years now, and basically whatever strategy has been tried and tested before hasn't worked. You know, the war hasn't been won, the war hasn't stopped, and it's at that point in space and time where people are dying, I would say, needlessly, you know, just for the sake of keeping the war going. And I think any stride towards peace is welcome. Now, with President Trump, I mean, I've met him a couple of times, and I know how he operates. He uses this tactic of a smoke screen, so you can see a lot of conflicting messages coming out from the White House and the US in general. And adding to that, we've got European Union, different countries expressing different views. We have Putin trying to basically bluff his way into this and control the situation. So my advice to everyone right now would be to kind of divide everything you read and hear by 10 and just let the process play out. And you're going to see results sooner rather than later. So, but I'm more optimistic than I was in October last year.
Why are you more optimistic? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I'm more optimistic because, like, look, if you assess the strategy, I mean, this war against a country like Russia is unwinnable with the approach that had been taken. Ukraine's been doing everything. You know, Ukrainians were dying by the thousands. You know, civilians were hurting. Everyone was pushing Putin back. And the world had basically just been negotiating for 3 years. You know, the bureaucracy was trying to figure out where that line of escalation lies, the red line or the brown line of Mr. Putin. And, you know, basically it was a war of attrition to bleed Russia dry with a million cuts. And, you know, had they been a citizen of a different country and a patriot of a different country, I would tell you, like, yeah, that's a good strategy. I mean, do that to China, for example, as well. Because, I mean, Russia's weaker now than it was like 4 years ago. And the myth of that Russian mighty bear and that army and their tactical nuclear weapons has been, you know, dismissed. You know, nobody believes that Russia is an all-powerful entity. Now, Russia knows that. But unfortunately, I'm Ukrainian, and I'm not prepared to allow my country to to fight to the very last Ukrainian, and neither is President Zelensky, and I applaud him for that. So basically, that's why Trump is welcome news. I think his second presidency is all about his legacy, first and foremost, and he's got a big ego, so that's some big legacy he's after. So and since he prioritized ending the war, he should do it. And there are certain things Ukraine won't do. So just saying, okay, fine, give Zelensky to Russia, give Kiev to Russia, Ukrainians go to Siberia and, to the concentration camps, and let's forget about it. That's not going to be accepted. And Ukraine is a powerful country. I mean, we're still fighting. Russia is not moving any closer to Kiev than it had been 3 years ago when it decided to take Kiev in 3 days. So on that front, that won't be the end of Ukraine in this process. And Trump wouldn't want that legacy. Now, what concessions everyone makes, that depends first and foremost on President Trump. And he's a good negotiator, let's put it this way.
And let's talk about the concessions, how they might look. If it's a case of Russia being allowed to keep some or all of the territory that at the moment it occupies, would that be something that Zelensky might say, OK, because if it stops the bloodshed, then I can live with that? And what would be the thing that he then asks for in return?
Well, it's not as simple as that. I mean, to be honest, it's not the land for me. The resolution to Ukraine's struggle in this war. It's the people. It's the people and the future. Those are the two characteristics that I'm more interested in, and I think President Zelensky understands that fully. It's not even how this war ends in terms of territory. It's what happens to Ukraine after the guns stop firing, and that's important because. If you think of, I know it's a horrible analogy, but do pardon me, 3 years of the war do take that toll. So basically, if we compare it, say, to a football match, it's full time at 1-1. Ukraine was winning because Russia spectacularly failed to take Kiev and to show the world how quickly it moves to Berlin or Lisbon or London, wherever they wanted to end up in the narcissistic, schizophrenic dreams and nightmares. So, then Russia equalized because, that bureaucracy and the stupidity of what happened, especially in 23, 24, in the US, first and foremost, that allowed Russia to equalize and have the full-time whistle at 1-1. Now, if Ukraine is left alone, Russia will come back. If we don't have security guarantees, if we don't have a running economy, if we have Russian meddling in our politics, if Russia has a say in as to which churches we go to, what language we speak, and so on and so forth, Ukraine will be Russia in the next few years, tops. Now, if Ukraine, whatever's left of Ukraine, if we're forced to concede some territory, if that new Ukraine, temporarily new Ukraine, because I believe sooner or later Putin will die, and nothing is permanent in this world. So whatever that temporary Ukraine looks like, if it's supported, if it becomes a valuable member of the Western society, if there are security guarantees in place, if we rebuild it akin to North Korea, South Korea, for example, after the Korean War, then then it's a victory for Ukraine, it's a victory for the West, and we win it in overtime 2-1. So that's what I'm more interested in, not in some some scorched earth somewhere.
Yeah.
With Putin stuff.
It's fascinating listening to you, and I think as well, when it comes to carving things up, for want of a better phrase, we're both using analogies that might not be politically correct, but we don't work in political correct circles on this channel. When it looks at sort of sharing the spoils after a war, so to speak, it usually comes down to a battle over resources. If Ukraine is to be rebuilt, Ukraine's going to want to keep some of those absolutely vital resources that it boasts. It's fantastic for mining. It's got good fossil fuel reserves. It produces a heck of a lot of the world's fertilizer and wheat and so on and so forth that could allow it to be a prosperous exporting nation with a significant amount of diplomatic leverage when it comes to getting other countries to back it, to make sure it can go back to its former glory or even greater glory in the future. But Putin's also going to be eyeing up those things, isn't he? And so it is going to get down to the nitty-gritty of who gets what and what can be lived with, essentially.
Well, let me tell you a valuable lesson from history. There was a country called Southern Vietnam. And for the US, there was direct military involvement, then there was military aid, then the Congress kind of started dragging its feet. And basically, the US spectacularly lost that war. Now, what happened next? Southern Vietnam became Vietnam. And now, decades later, the President Biden was taking photos with, the leader of Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh's portrait. So history is never written in black and white. And obviously, there's a lot of pragmatism. And from that point of view, I don't think the UK or the US or the Western society and civilized world in general would want those resources and Ukraine with its experience. Because, we're the only ones who've actually faced the bear, so to speak. So probably the West wouldn't want that in Putin's hands. If they do, they're just plain stupid.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, I wouldn't underestimate their levels of stupidity, as we have sort of alluded to in the past. It seems to me that this Munich conference, there's a lot of leaders in Europe grandstanding, saying their sort of soundbite, saying, no, we support Ukraine, Putin mustn't be appeased. And yet at the outbreak of this, that is exactly what they were doing. They were all bending over backwards to largely appease Putin. They showed absolutely no spine. And it's great to hear that actually there is a degree of pragmatism coming out of Ukraine. The problem is Europe going to listen? Or has it got to the stage now that actually if it's a room with Putin, with Trump and with Zelensky in it, and you say to von der Leyen and you say to Macron and you say to Starmer and whoever else, just stay out of it, that actually we can come to some sort of resolution? Or is Europe going to be needed to help shore that up?
No, Europe will be needed, and it's President Trump's view that Europe needs to do its part. Now, it's debatable whether Europe's been doing enough or more than enough or less than enough. It's very subjective in that sense, but it will definitely involve European nations in one form or another. But look, I can explain Putin to you really easily, and that's what a lot of people don't get. And pragmatic politics looks like this. If you had a room full of people and you had a murderer, thief, and a rapist, all one person in that room, can you deal with that person? Can you, can you get him to read you a poem? Could you talk with him? Could you do anything? Yes, you can. All you need to do is just kind of handcuff him to the door so he doesn't reach you. That's it. That's how you work with Russia. You can trade with it if you want to, but trade with it with caution. Understanding that if you're buying gas, natural gas or oil from Russia, that's a weapon. They will get you hooked on it, and one day they will say the price goes up 5 times, or we won't sell it to you. And you're going to have a political crisis that will weaken you, and then their tanks will come in. That's how it works. So with Putin, you just have to be pragmatic. You have to know his weaknesses. You have to know how to contain Russia, and you have to be strong. That's it. Chain the murderer to the door, then you can speak with him.
Do you know, it's absolutely fascinating talking to you, Igor. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've not heard so much common sense on this particular topic. It's been absolutely illuminating. And let's catch up again as this story progresses. That's Igor Novikov, who's a former advisor to President Zelensky. And so I just want to sum up some of the brilliant things that he said there, because it's worth doing that. The idea that Ukraine is relatively pragmatic, it doesn't want any more bloodshed. And so actually, perhaps there is a deal to be done, number one. Number two, yes, a deal's done now. That stops the bloodshed. But Putin's getting on in his years. In maybe 5 years, 10 years, there might be a different leader. The whole situation may have changed again, and that's when you negotiate to get back what you have lost. Number three, be very aware of who Putin is. Don't suddenly go, oh, we can trust you now, that's great, you're going to stay in your corner. No, get real. And actually welcoming that conversation with Donald Trump, other than the virtue signalling, self-aggrandizing morons from Europe over at that summit who basically just want to make the story about them. Thank you, Igor. Fantastic having his point of view. Right, we're going to take a break now, but when we come back after the break, it's time for you to give your point of view. So, the number to dial, if you haven't saved this in your phone already as an avid listener, why don't you? 0344 499 1000. That way you can talk to me in the studio. Or you can use that number to send me a WhatsApp. Or you can send me a voice note on WhatsApp. You know I love those. Let's try to get some voiceos after this, Ted. Make sure they're clean. Right, 8722 is the number on text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. That way it pings the aerials that specifically send it down to this exact studio. Not any others in this building. And you can catch up with us on X at talkTV. Back after this.
You're talking about the 1,653. So that's £72 million worth since January the 1st. Each one of these migrants cost us £40,000 a year, right?
Roughly around 35 to 40,000. Once they are here over another year, they may well have been moved on to a council and given a council accommodation or taken out of the Home Office. We still will pay for them to have their benefit. So that number continues every year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, hello there. Honestly, Tech Op and Ted, they're a funny bunch, those two. Bunch of cards, characters, a lot of them. They've been screening your voice notes. They don't pass muster, apparently. Blame them, not me. Anyway, blame yourselves. Right, no, look, there's so much to get through. So if you've left a voice note and we haven't got round to listening to it yet to make sure that Ofcom don't fine us gazillions of pounds and put us out of business, then, you know, we do what we can. But we can answer the phone, so keep it clean. Here's Mike in Wolverhampton. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Hi.
I served in the armed forces a total of 12 years, 9 years with the regiment and 3 years with the colours. I've been on active service 3 times. I'm 80 years of age now. And I'm absolutely disgusted with the useless Labour, Liberal and Conservative way of dealing with things. It's costing us billions of pounds to keep these people coming across the English Channel. Billions. They're not telling us the truth. It's not 96 million. That's just for the hotel.
Yeah.
That's not including the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
If we use the Royal Navy, who were already funded with billions of pounds, the SAS, the commandos, pick them up mid-channel, feed them, be kind to them, put them back in their boats and use the power boats that we use for the SAS and the commandos and send them back. Don't even let them land. They're coming in illegally. We've got to have tough love.
Yeah, Mike, I couldn't agree with you more. First of all, can I just say, Mike, thank you for your service. I think it's a lovely tradition that Americans have when they speak to a veteran. It's the first thing they say. And I don't think we do that enough. We don't appreciate our armed forces enough and what people have sacrificed in that role, especially those who have done tours as well. So first of all, thank you ever so much for your service for this country and the wider international community.
I can't even get a pension, love.
Why?
Because I left the armed forces after guarding Rudolf Hess in Spandau Prison. And I left just before they changed the rules. But a politician, after 8 years, on over £1,600 a week, plus £100,000 payoff, plus their expenses, plus their second homes, plus the directorships in companies, you name it, and £500 a day, which they're not even doing in Parliament, which you know about.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I know all about that.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
I am not being treated as you think that we are getting treated.
No, I don't think, no. Don't get me wrong. I don't think veterans are treated well at all. I think they're treated appallingly. And do you know what really sticks in my craw? When these men are coming over on the boats, and I'm absolutely with you, we have a right under the UN Convention to defend our territorial waters. Within 12 miles of our coastline, we are allowed to make sure that people don't cross that illegally. I think we turn one boat around and send it back to France. The optics of it would send a very clear message, and all of a sudden it would cut off that artery because all the traffickers saying, oh, you know, come on a boat, you're going to get to Britain, blown out of the water, won't work anymore.
You're absolutely spot on.
Yeah, but also this is what really gets on my nerves.
I stood for UKIP in Bilston, right?
Yeah.
I was 76, I was still working. I came home, put my whistle and flute on and went down for the count. Now in Bilston, you're lucky to get 80 votes. You're doing well against the Labour Party because it's a bastion area for the Labour Party.
Yeah.
I got 968.
Wow. Good on you.
And
Good
their
on
maximum vote after the campaign, which I couldn't afford to do, was 1,205 against 968. Now, Nigel Farage has set up a party reformed. I'd love to get into Parliament because I'm sick and tired of these useless people who've never done a day's work in their life, and they're milking the system for everything they can get.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't mind if they were doing the job, but they're not.
No. Well, but this is the other thing, right? This is what really sticks in my craw. When these people across the channel break into our country illegally and we actually have the gall to house them in barracks, we want to turn old airfields and give them old army housing. It's not good enough for them, is it? Oh, no, they can't live on that. Oh, servicemen have to tolerate that. But, oh, no, the precious migrants can't live in old army barracks. Why are they even being offered that? Frankly speaking, if you've broken into a country, you're lucky enough to be allowed to sleep under canvas, let alone actually have a hot meal, a soup kitchen, a hairdresser, a doctor, a PlayStation. Oh, he's dropped off. I liked Mike. Do you know what? He is saying he wouldn't mind getting into politics. How old's Donald Trump? 77, 78, something like that? 76, I don't know. He's in his late 70s, though, isn't he? And he's not like that old fossil Biden. He's, you know, circling the plug hole. He's chipper as anything. If Mike wants to get into politics, I say, Mike, you go and get into politics. You sound like you've got your head screwed on. Right, let's quickly speak to Robert now, who's in Hertfordshire. Hi, Robert.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Mike for his service as well.
Yes.
I'd like to. But I've got, you know, I'm a member of Reform, but I've got a sharp shot for Mike. And the trouble is, until we get rid of the radical lawyers and judges that are coming up with these ridiculous decisions, Farage is not going to be able to do anything. If he won an election tomorrow, he would have all his teeth pulled out. And the trouble is, you know, we're blaming the migrants coming over here. You can't really blame them, really.
No, they're just opportunists. They paid a lot of money to get here at the end of the day.
Big business, and you need to start at the top. So you need to look at all these lawyers who. I'll give you an example. The lawyer who represented the two guys in Manchester.
That Spiv, the Spiv lawyer, Yakub.
He's got two Lamborghinis.
Oh, look, you know, I've got to be careful because he is a lawyer and I don't want to libel myself, but I've got plenty I could say and plenty I think about that man. His day will come, and I don't mean in a good way.
Well,
but listen, I want to pick up on what you said. Let's start unpacking some of this, right?
Okay.
So you say if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, he's still going to have all the lawyers. You are absolutely bang on, but here is a way out of this, right? Because I've written an article on this. I've done my research. I've wargamed a lot of it. Now, first of all, it requires whichever party, let's say it's whichever party wants to try and, you know, make Britain great again, it requires that party to have a really big majority, the likes of which, say, Labour have right now, because that way you're not going to have all the politicking, the prevaricating, the, you know, whatever it is, proroguing Parliament and all of that nonsense that goes on. You need to have a good old majority with everybody singing off the same hymn sheet and voting in the same direction. Now, when you've got that, there are things you can do. Number one, you instantly undo what Blair put in place, which is the supremacy of the Supreme Court. You bring back the Lord Chancellor and say Parliament is sovereign. Bam. Number two, you have a great repeal bill. You have to get rid of all the legislation, not just leave the ECHR. Obviously, that happens. You leave the ECHR. But you need to get rid of all the rubbish from the ECHR, which is now in the canon of British law. So you need to have a great repeal bill. So you need to get rid of all of that. You actually have to scrap the Human Rights Act. Oh, you can't do that. Scrap human rights. You're going to have Chop Chop Square outside the Tower of London and send kids up chimneys. Of course you're not. There's criminal law that deals with all of that. The Human Rights Act is the worst named thing in the world. It doesn't actually protect human rights. It kind of does the opposite. It's legal loopholes for bad people. So you have to get rid of that. If you then want to redraft a British Bill of Rights, fine. Be my guest. Now, if you did that, now the other big stumbling block are going to be a load of wet blankets in the civil service who don't like the way things have been done. You also come up with a rule that you either do what the government says, you actually make sure that you manifest government policy and government principle, or you lose your job. You get the sack. The problem is, and you can see it all the time with successive governments, they wait for the civil service to tell them what to do, or the judges to tell them what to do. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer's the exact definition of, I don't know what to do, please can you tell me? It's international law. But if someone, you know, if there is someone who's going to be a divisive, well, he is divisive, isn't he? A decisive and strong leader, perhaps that is Nigel Farage. But like you said, he has to pave his way to being able to get things done. I've briefly outlined there a little blueprint of what whoever gets into, you know, number 10 next time round could do. It'll be a tough order, because a lot of the UK population, if you said to them, well, we've got to get rid of the Human Rights Act, says, you can't do that. Got to leave the ECHR. No, that will make us a pariah state, because they've been fed all of this nonsense for so long. So you've also got to have a good old PR campaign to sell this concept to people so they get it. Robert, thank you ever so much. You brought up such an important point, and it was great to be able to riff on it, actually. OK, we're going to take a short break now. But before we do, if you're sitting there thinking, oh, gosh, I could really do with a 5-star cruise around the Bahamas, then guess what? You'd need to fund it, wouldn't you? You might need some moolah in your pocket. Enter this competition and you could be in with a chance of winning 25k.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, there you go. If you're entering, and please do enter, because you might win. You know, no play, no win. But there's some sort of phrase that I messed up there. Anyway, if you are entering, then very good luck. Taking a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be discussing the fact that Labour are under fire yet again for a WhatsApp group. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, in a world where we're all told to be kind and people are put in clink for provocative statements on social media, you would think that the very people following these rules would be the Labour Party themselves, as they seem to be the ones who are most keen to enforce them. And yet, day after day, we're finding out that when they all get together in WhatsApp groups, they're not really using the language of the Be Kind Brigade. No, far from it. They're calling veterans and pensioners Nazis. That's right. They're talking about people, including pensioners, veterans and disabled people who took part in an anti-immigration protest at the city's Guildhall Square, this is in Portsmouth, of being Nazis, fascist thugs and terrorists. Now, this group had taken to the streets just days after Southport riots in July in a protest. They carried banners saying veterans before asylum seekers. I think that's kind of fair, to be honest. If you fought for this country and paid taxes, then probably you should be looked after. Isn't it funny? We just had Mike from Wolverhampton on just earlier there saying he doesn't even get a pension. He's done 3 tours, served in the army, 80 years old. He's denied a pension. Anyway, it's funny how these things naturally segue, isn't it? Anyway, they were then later ambushed by counter-protesters who screamed, "Nazi scum off our streets." Yep, the Socialist Workers' Party. I've encountered them myself. You know, they use language like stamping on the neck. They're disgusting. I hate these people. They turn up with their placards and they just scream demonically at little old ladies and stuff like that, calling people racists and Nazi and scum. And what do you mean by off our streets and stamping on the neck? Huh? That's what I want to know. Anyway, they all get G'd up, don't they? And they get in their WhatsApp groups and they start calling people pensioners and things racists and scum and fascist thugs and terrorists and Nazis. And yeah, I think it's about time that this stuff was exposed because it's not on. Let's speak to Mike Buckley, who's a former Labour Party advisor. Mike, you can't have one rule for one lot of people and another rule for another. I'm just going to lay my cards on the table. I think when it comes to people chatting in WhatsApp groups, I don't want to live in a society where whatever your job is, a politician or a plasterer, you get persecuted for it. Banter's banter. I'm a big believer in free speech to a degree. But when you've got people sort of actively calling pensioners and disabled people fascist thugs and scum, we've got a problem, haven't we? That doesn't exactly betray a be kind attitude. It doesn't even betray an attitude of basic tolerance.
No, it doesn't. You're entirely right. And these big WhatsApp threads are clearly difficult to manage, but that is no excuse. At Portsmouth Labour, I think you're talking about the Portsmouth Labour WhatsApp group that was referenced in the Daily Mail today, which has, I think it had 143 members in it. It was formally moderated, or one of the admins was the Portsmouth MP, Stephen Morgan. He stepped down for administrating it recently. I don't know if you've ever managed or been admin on big WhatsApp threads. I have on occasion. You can't feasibly look at every message. But I think what's good with this is that Portsmouth Labour, whoever now manages it, they've put out a statement saying, they recognise that some of the language on there was not appropriate, and they're going to do more to manage it. I'm not excusing that language for a minute, but thankfully it does not compare to the WhatsApp group that was reported earlier in the week, which had Andrew Gwynn and Oliver Ryan, MPs in it, and both of them have now been rightly suspended from the Labour Party, have lost the Labour Party whip and their membership as well.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. The thing is, though, if we're going to sort of say, well, what's OK language and what isn't OK language, the current Health Secretary has said some pretty tasty things on social media in the past, talking about throwing Jan Moya, I never quite know how to say her surname, under a bus or under a train. I mean, there's been some pretty tasty language from people in cabinet. The problem is when you go down the route of what free speech is allowed and what isn't, you suddenly find it becomes very subjective, don't you?
Well, I think some things are very clearly right and wrong. I don't know about the issue that you mentioned with West Streeting and the woman being thrown under a bus or not being thrown under a bus, and hopefully she wasn't. At all. So I don't know what he said, and I don't know what the context was. But I think we live in an age now where what we say now and what we said years ago is recorded, it's screenshotable. Obviously we have the same responsibility when we're speaking to people face to face, but I think there's evidence out there to say that people feel freer to use abusive and inappropriate language through the medium of a screen. That is something I think we're still adjusting to as a society. That doesn't make any of this right, by the way. We need rules in place. Obviously, to some degree, it's hard to police, but I think what's good in recent days is that some of this has come to light. Some clearly inappropriate people have been removed from office, and that is a very good thing. And standards are being put in place and are being upheld. Does this need to go further? It probably does. Does the law need to be changed? I actually don't know. Maybe the law that we have just needs to be applied better. But given the volume of messages, of course, it's hard for anybody to keep on top of it. But one thing that does need to be done more, we need greater moderation from social media companies who tend to turn a blind eye to all of this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got so many questions bubbling over in my head here. I don't know where to begin. Like I said before, I'm not exactly a free speech absolutist, but I am very pro-free speech. And I still maintain that, if people are joking or having banter in a private WhatsApp group, that's, I don't like the intrusion, because how you police it and where you draw the line suddenly become extremely contentious issues. And whether it's a Labour MP or a plasterer or a Reform Party candidate, if someone's having banter, it's banter. And I just kind of think, OK. What to me it does betray, though, is just a lack of intelligence. You said to me, am I in big WhatsApp groups? I get added to them, and the first thing I do is silence them and stick them in archive, or just sort of after a while just go exit. I never contribute to them, because I know better than that, because I've got a brain. It doesn't really betray a whole lot of nous or intelligence from people who want to serve in politics.
Well, I agree with you there. And I think anybody, particularly MPs, because they're subject to so much scrutiny, but also councillors, certainly anybody in public life, particularly if they're elected and saying, well, I'm here to serve the public, I think they have a greater responsibility in this area. But also business leaders, lawyers, people in the public, like actors and singers and all that kind of thing. They have a greater degree of responsibility with this, because their careers depend on it. One set of headlines, as we saw in the last week, can end somebody's career. I mean, Andrew Gwynn is not coming back into politics. There's no way around that after the things that he posted himself. So, his career was coming to an end because in what that evidenced is who he is on the inside and what he thinks, But the fact that it's printed, it's deeply, deeply offensive towards individuals and towards groups in society. And clearly, as you say, evidence is A, that he's not very clever, and B, that actually his views are deeply objectionable.
Now, this sort of segues nicely into the last thing I want to talk about, because it's a subject quite close to my heart, which is I kind of feel, personally, that elements of the left get away with using really despicable language. And I mean calling someone a fascist. It's an extremely strong word. Or a Nazi. Or a racist. Or scum. The problem when you do that, what you're doing is saying this person, they might have political views that they're concerned about immigration, OK? You know, maybe they just got old-fashioned views. Maybe you could say some people's views are xenophobic. But when you start saying fascist, Nazi, thug, scum, you're painting someone as utterly despicable to the point of being dangerous. And that then becomes a threat to them. Do we need to actually start having a conversation about whether or not we need to park words like Nazi, scum, fascist, far-right thug, racist, which are just bandied about now as terms of insult to close down political debate when we need to be a country sitting around and discussing things properly?
I mean, in terms of the word racist views are expressed in our country, and I think there's been an increase in that. And sometimes from people who really ought to know better or in positions where they shouldn't be using racist language, including some members of parliament, some councillors, etc., and indeed media people. And I think that does need to be called out, but that needs to be done in terms of calling out a specific thing that somebody has said, I think, rather than saying about somebody that they are a racist. I think there's a big difference saying what you said was racist or this language was racist, rather than calling somebody a racist person. I think they're very different things, actually. In terms of fascists and Nazis, clearly there have been people who were actual fascists and Nazis in the past, and you can certainly ascribe fascist views to some people in society at the minute. I wouldn't say that anybody's an actual Nazi. I think once you get, to be honest, the point of comparing somebody to a Nazi or to Hitler, you've kind of left the debate, really, and made yourself look rather silly. But I think you certainly need to be very, very careful if you're describing somebody as a fascist. It certainly isn't a term that should be used flippantly. Because it has a real meaning, and I think we want to hang on to what that real meaning means because it's horrific. And so if somebody is expressing those views, that word needs to carry real weight. Yeah. And if you're just using it as a general insult, it's going to lose that weight. And so the way referenced in that WhatsApp thread, for example, was just ridiculous and actually quite abusive. It didn't reflect the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and frankly, using it against pensioners who, by and large, actually fought the Nazis is beyond the pale, as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk now about Rachel Reeves. What is going on here? Because, you know, we've had various ministers come out and back her and say, there's nothing to see here, this is all made up, there's been no investigation. And the BBC is saying, no. We've done the investigation into this, and apparently she has been looked into for her expenses at HBOS. I mean, first of all, which side is telling the truth, do you think? And secondly, do you think she's got long as Chancellor?
Keir's committed to her being Chancellor right up to the next election, and I don't see her being moved at all, certainly not in the foreseeable future. So I think Rachel Reeves is in her job. She's going to continue doing her job, and she's committed to making the economy work for the working people and indeed the non-working people, you know, of this country, and making us all wealthier and making the country a better place to live. And I wish her every goodwill in that endeavour. In terms of the expenses when she was at HBOS, I don't actually know where this story came from. I don't know what the truth of the matter is because I wasn't there, you know, nor do you, I realise. So all we can do is rely on the information that we have. Her spokesperson has said that she wasn't investigated and that she's no recollection of any impropriety or being accused of anything or any investigation while she was there. The lawyer who apparently was involved when she was leaving HBOS or was negotiating her exit has posted online and said, well, he didn't know anything about it at the time and there isn't a case to answer. And presumably he would know that if he was involved in her exit from HBOS. So I don't know what the truth of the situation is. With the information that I have seen, there isn't a case to answer. If anybody has any real evidence rather than just rumour and conjecture on this, then they should put it in the public domain.
Mike has been brilliant talking to you, former Labour Party advisor there, saying best of luck to Rachel Reeves, supports her economic policies. Of course, I do not. But that is politics, my friends. The proof will be in the pudding. And at the moment, to me, it's not a particularly sweet dessert, is it? But there you go. Do you know what? I actually wish her all the best because we actually need a Chancellor who does some good for this country because it would be good for us, wouldn't it? I don't really think it's the right path that's been taken. But like I said, I don't wish on someone to be a failure in politics, especially when they're actually running the country's coffers. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about the fact that colleges are now allowing pupils on some courses to work from home because that's going to prepare them for real-life hybrid working. Guess what? Real life happens when you take the slanket off and leave your front door. We're discussing that after this.
This report from the Children's Society here in Britain yesterday said that 1 in 8 kids who identify as animals also identify as trans or non-binary. Do you recognise that connection?
I guess it's not really a connection. I just know that our community is very welcoming to everybody, including the LGBTQ plus community. And so they find a safe place here. So it just happens to fall in line that way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back. It's the last 10 minutes of the show, and then I am going to toddle off to my abode. But you know what? If I was a student at certain colleges, I may not have needed to leave it today, because apparently some colleges have started to allow pupils on some courses to work from home. This is apparently to prepare them for the real-life hybrid working experience. You better put some practice inside your own house. You might need that in the future. That's a valuable life skill. This is for students who are taking their T-levels, which is the technical equivalent of A-levels. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're doing T-levels, if it's technical, I don't know, it's been like 1,000 years since I was at school, but surely that's doing practical stuff like engineer, electrician staff, plumbing. I mean, you can't surely working in someone else's home. I don't know. Let's speak to Tim Clark, who's a former head teacher. Let's find out if he knows, and let's see if he thinks this is a good idea. I mean, the world has changed. We're in the new normal. Perhaps we all need some practice under our blankets. How are you doing, Tim?
Hi, Alex. Good to see you.
I note that you're working from home right now.
I am, yeah. OK, well, the T-levels, as you said, they're the equivalent of A-levels, and they are technical courses for which 20% of the time is supposed to be spent on work placement, and 80% in college, 20% on a work placement. But the big problem is that colleges are finding it incredibly difficult to actually find employers to take students to do the 20%, which equates to about a 9-week work placement. And what the DFE is arguing is that by reducing the amount of time the students do on the placement, they will make T-levels more attractive to employers. Now, personally, I think they're going about it the wrong way. What they should have done is say to employers, what do you need to encourage you to take more students and to keep them for the full 9 weeks? But what they're actually doing is saying your incentive is to take them for less time. But the underlying problem is finding enough employers to take students for those 9 weeks.
So hold on, let's unpack this a bit. So there's a couple of things which are sort of jarring in my head here. First of all, the idea that, I assume one of the reasons why employers aren't wanting to take students is because they're not in the office or, whatever either, perhaps. But the idea that it makes an employer more attractive by saying, actually, we won't give this person experience working with you, alongside you, hand in glove, learning your operation. Actually, they're just going to watch, Netflix instead. Does that make them more employable? Seems really
Absolutely.
crazy.
No, it doesn't at all. I totally agree with you, Alex. But of course, the point is that the DFE has got to find ways of making placements more attractive to employers. The problem here isn't the colleges. Yeah. The problem here is colleges finding enough employers to offer those 9-week placements. Now, I'm not agreeing with what the government has done. I disagree with it. I think they've gone about it in completely the wrong way. But that is their logic. And if I think, my first headship was in a small market town, the number of employers in a small market town is limited, and the number of employers who would be prepared to offer a 9-week placement to a student is probably non-existent. So are you saying, or is the DFE saying, well, if you live in a market town or a rural area, you can't do a T-level because we can't find employers to take you? What I think would have been a much better approach would be to say to employers, what do you need? What do you want to take more students and to take them for longer? But you can bet your bottom dollar the response would be, we either want money or we want a tax break, and so be it. Education can't be cheap.
Yeah.
But at the moment, there is no incentive for an employer to take a T-level student, other than they may end up with a good student that they want to then keep.
They want to keep.
They might not.
What are sort of businesses we're talking about here? When people are going on work placements, are we talking about practical things? Go get in the white van and go and help replumb this house? Are we talking about go and sit here and do spreadsheets? Or
at the moment, there are 22 different courses, and they range from things such as finance, education, health, construction. And again, you can just think from that list, if you own a construction firm, you are going to be wary about taking a student for 9 weeks. And if there's no incentive for you to do that, other than you might end up with a good student that you want to keep, that is the only incentive.
Yeah. So what do you think employers, they might all have very different demands. I'd imagine, construction might say, we don't want indemnity. If this person's going to be on our site for 9 weeks, if they end up breaking a leg, it's not on our, it's not on our heads. Yeah. I'm assuming that somebody who, if you've got someone who's going, wants to be taught how to work in finance, then you've got to have somebody say, this is how you log into the computer system. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. So perhaps they think, well, we need a bit of help resourcing that, although I would say you're basically getting free labour, aren't you? I used to do data input for the NHS. It wasn't brilliantly paid then. If it doesn't take 1,000 years to learn how to start doing spreadsheets and process invoices. You've actually got someone doing it for free. But do you think the solution here is to sit down and say to, like you said, say to the employers, what is it you need, and make sure those needs are met? Because it cannot be healthy. We've got a generation of young people, they don't even like talking to each other. They'd rather send each other a text message while sitting next to each other in a canteen, and I'm desperately worried for them.
Yeah. Well, I think there are two things, Alex. I think the actual idea behind T-levels was quite inspired. It was the first serious attempt to offer high-quality technical vocational education in this country for about 60 years. So the idea behind them, I think, is very good. But sadly, like so many educational policies, the actual detail was worked out by people who have never had any experience of running schools and colleges. And anyone who has run a school or a college would tell you straight away finding work placements is one of the most difficult thing to do. I mean, in both my schools where I was head, we offered the traditional 2 weeks work experience, and it became practically impossible to get firms to take kids for 2 weeks. In fact, in one school, we employed someone full-time for the year whose only job was coordinating the 2 week work experience. It became that difficult. Well, if firms won't take someone for 2 weeks, they're not going to take them for 9 weeks. So I think on the one hand, there need to be concrete incentives for firms to take students. And the second thing, and I argued this in a report I wrote last year, it is the work placements that are holding T-levels back. I think what we need to do is to develop alongside them high-quality courses, technical vocational courses, that aren't dependent on local employers. Now, of course, they'll have a different feel to them if you take that work placement out. But you wouldn't have a situation where you said to, I don't know, a student in rural Devon, well, you can't do geography because the local employers don't want you to. That just wouldn't happen. But that is what's happening with T-levels.
You know, also, if kids are preparing for the real world, they have to learn to not live at home either. Tim, thank you ever so much. Fantastic catching up with you. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
What did you want to be when you were growing up? Did you do like apprenticeships? Was it always this?
Yeah, it kind of was, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, it sort of was.
So you didn't have a sort of a previous life doing something different?
Well, my dad was a painter and decorator, and so there was always that, you know, if it all goes wrong, I'll just go and work with my dad. Which I did do a bit of that when I left school.
What is your heritage? You just got straight into the radios, did you?
No, I did a couple of